So we had to stop and hit record there. Talking about mitochondrial health and how different environmental factors affect mitochondrial health. And just as we were talking there, and just as I said, hey, let's just start recording, one of the thoughts I had was, if you talk to, from the exercise physiology standpoint, it's all about mitochondrial health. It's all about building more mitochondria to power more energy, to essentially to make more energy factories in your body. But that's just one thought I had there. You were going down a route of explaining that relationship that we have and the sort of theory that's been running for a while that may be updated soon about that relationship that we have with mitochondria and why it's there, where it came from. I mean, this is a hugely complex topic, but could I just press rewind for a second on you and we could go back a little bit?
So I feel having fun with these really complex topics, taking it out of the scientific thing, because if from the tradition I'm from, it's direct experience that matters, but your mind still has to be convinced conceptually. So we can read tons of books and tons of facts, right? And we think we have it understood, but we don't enact it in our life. Most people, you read stuff and say, yeah, I've read that. I know that, all that kind of thing, but you don't actually live it. Just like a quantum physicist, right? He learns that there's no matter there. There's nothing, no particle. But does he come out of the lab and live differently? No, he probably just forgets it, pushes it, because it's, what did he do with that? What the traditions of direct experience. So to get back to mitochondria, because everything is coming up to about this idea of cellular metabolism and energy production, things like that. And then stress is a huge factor in that, and how it affects hormones and everything else. But we have not figured it all out. And then we act like we do conceptually, and then something else comes along. My idea is thinking that, I mean, this is just thoughts that come out that you look at, okay, what's going on in this revolution right now that is ancient ways of thinking coming back into modern times, but then putting them on spin. Mitochondria. So the theory goes, when you look at the theories of how eukaryotic cells form, so plants and animals, that they have this double membrane, that they have ability to produce all this energy for themselves and protection. But they say that the mitochondria, this is still one of the big theories, the mitochondria was an ancient, simple organism that was susceptible to damage, like bacteria are. Bacteria are very susceptible to damage. They mutate consistently. They depend on mutation, actually, to improve themselves and the sheer number of production. So you can think of mitochondria the same.
And also depend on us to host them, I guess, the bacteria to actually...
Yes.
To actually have some sort of a system to exist and to replicate and cause damage.
Exactly. So then
Bacteria.
if you think that as a parasitic relationship, or one is actually feeding off and destroying the other, or a symbiotic relationship, in this case would be the mitochondria formed a symbiotic relationship with this cell that housed it and was more protected, but couldn't produce enough of its own energy. So maybe the slow kind of thing. All right. And then it formed a relationship with the mitochondria that produce energy, but is susceptible to damage because of its membrane structure and that. And then they formed this symbiotic relationship. In ancient times in evolution, it's a collaboration. And this is interesting because you go back to Charles Darwin in Origin of the Species, and people think they got that figured out because we learned this in school, that it's survival of the fittest, but that's not what he said. He said that, but in a different way. The main thrust of that book, because he was a spiritual person as well, was he's trying to understand the manifestation of the things in this world, and then what is going to give you an advantage, and how do things keep changing through time and going extinct, things like that. And he's basically, if you look at it, the main thrust was about collaboration. So the organism that learned to collaborate will thrive. And so this is a peak example of that, is where you have this mitochondria forming a relationship with this other cell. And then now we think of it as just one thing. We're made of one cell, these eukaryotic cells. Animal cells, we're made of it. But in reality, it's a collaboration. It's a partnership. And say, okay, then what if this partnership, all of a sudden they think, you know what? I don't like this partnership anymore. And it says, okay, what's going to happen? You know what? You drink too much. You do take crappy foods. You do all the stuff. And the mitochondria talking to the cell. I just don't like bathing in this stuff anymore. It's making me feel sick. And so, which is interesting because we were talking with Adam before, is that mitochondria, when they are under threat and damaged, they do something interesting. They start sending out compounds that the damage out of other mitochondria. And then why would a cell try to self-destruct just because one portion is not functioning well? But maybe it's this partnership saying the mitochondria is saying, I just don't like this anymore. I'm sick of the
Fed
way
up.
that you live your life. And then it just basically it's actually causing you to break down and leading to all these energy problems and diseases and cancers and all this stuff that keeps coming up, right? Heart disease, everything, because we are putting it under toxic stress.
Yeah.
And that could be, physical, psychological, emotional stress. But I'm saying we're bathed in things that we never were bathed in before. To do, toxic chemicals, invisible types of communication type things, everything in our environment with computers and everything. They didn't have that. And all of these it's funny because you talk about people that say, 5G, 6G, that could do anything to you. But we're electromagnetic beings and you're interfering with signaling all over the place. Look at whales. When you use sonar and things like that, they get confused and they can go up ashore. Well, the same thing's happening at the cell level to us. We're inundated with these invisible wavelengths, things like that we never had before. We're inundated with pesticides, solvents, all those microplastics and everything. I just read interesting thing that the bottles, a segue, that the glass bottles with plastic lids, I guess the plastic they use in that or whatever, it actually can cause even more microplastics than a plastic bottle. So it's basically, if you're going to use glass bottles, you won't have a problem as long as you have metal lids.
Well, and then I said this to my son the other day. I said, hey, when you get a paper cup from Starbucks or whatever, do you think it's actually paper? No, it's not paper. It's lined. Paper would just melt in your hands within 10 seconds of a hot coffee. And this It's lined with, what's it lined with?
Like paper straws.
Plastic.
Same idea, paper straws.
Yeah, it should be like that, but they're not, right? Every one of those cups is lined with plastic.
Right. And why we're talking about this is because microplastics, forever plastics, the amount that you have per day would blow your mind. Mm-hmm. Like I said, a lot of people get the equivalent in weight of, a credit card or something like that. You're getting it. And it's okay, segue again, because all this has to do with mitochondrial function, because it basically inhibits mitochondrial functioning, which is essential at your core root of everything else in your body, because you need energy for everything. So we talk about mind, body, energy. Okay, so you get the one thing they found that can successfully eliminate microplastics, forever plastics in your body, which are everywhere, in detergents, in toilet paper, in everything you're doing to yourself, coming in contact with mucosal membranes especially, is beta-glucans. So things like oats and all these different fibers that you have, or barley, mushrooms, all those have these beta-glucan structures that actually can eliminate microplastics that are already in your system. And this is where they feel that these microplastics embedded in your system, the one key thing they're doing all over your body that starts to have neurological effects, cancer-causing effects, detoxification effects, sexual reproduction effects, hormonal effects, is the mitochondria. And so if we can do anything possible to improve mitochondrial functioning, and getting back to this little conversation where the mitochondria is basically ready to get a divorce from the other cell, is that what do you do then to assure the mitochondria are bathed inside the cell, which it's housed in, so that they actually like the relationship and are doing things that are partnering with the relationship, and it feels like it's a win-win situation.
You got to lower the stress on them.
Totally lower the stress.
Just chill out and lower the stress on those poor little guys, right?
This is it. And
that's the first step.
It is the first step.
Yeah.
And we keep getting back to this because we've talked about this for so long, is, we talk about centering practices. We take it out, Adam and I get into the meditation, things like that. On a physical level, like I said, number one, look at where they're coming from. It'll blow you away. If you look up these microplastics, and there's different names for these things, how much of it is in the atmosphere. And then things are being sprayed all over the place. And some of these forever chemicals that they spray, that people have been going on forever and ever and called conspiracy. Now they're admitting all this stuff, Roundup, glyphosate, things like that. But there's so many things that if you keep on doing it, keep on having exposure, which that's the problem, is moderation is key, and we're not moderate. Mm-hmm. That can you do stuff? And I feel, okay, number one, that's why mushrooms have become big, is they have the beta-glucans.
Tons of beta-glucans.
Right? And they improve your immune system, which if you want to look at in a holistic way at mitochondrial function, because we often get into talking about Shilajit and coenzyme Q10, things like that, But in reality, if we don't detox, which is part of the ancient medicine, right? They're always detoxing and nourishing and doing it at the proper times. You don't just detox all the time, or you can actually really stress your body out. You don't always nourish all the time when you're already toxic. So then how do you sweep the house first? That would be the beta-glucans and de-stressing. But de-stressing, and then you think, okay, you tell somebody, you got to stop stressing. Or you tell yourself, I got to stop stressing. That just stresses you out. Basically, it's about letting go. How do you let go? And then you learn techniques, okay? If you're on a physical level, a lot more fiber. We've always been talking about that. A lot more clean water. And again, the microplastics are in that bottled water. So, I grew up in the 70s and thinking, I would never have thought that you would have to pay for water. That was absurd. That wouldn't even come in the conversation. The fact that we're paying for water and then we're thinking it's so good, but it's in these plastic bottles that are degrading, especially when they're in the light and oxygen in the store. Everything in a glass bottle is better than plastic, 100%, especially when it's exposed to light. If it's in a dark place, yeah, you can get less degradation. But then why would we want to keep on adding these plastics that are actually embedding in our tissue, really difficult to get rid of, especially if you consider our diet and our stress load? So this is where, back to mitochondria, are we going to start to find out that basically mitochondria is starting to flip us the bird? Because it just says, sorry.
Well, chronic fatigue syndrome is
huge.
It's huge. There's a lot of people that suffer from that condition, and there's of course always going to be environmental factors that are out of people's control, and that's harsh. When you find yourself in a situation that you're affected, physically, and you can't get out of it right away, that's challenging. But there's lots of things you can do to support along the way, right? And like we're talking about, smart supplementation, mushrooms in general have all kinds of unique compounds. And that's one of the coolest things about mushrooms, I think, right? There's the animal kingdom, the plant kingdom, and there's the fungi kingdom, and it's its own kingdom, right? It doesn't get enough. I mean, it does get enough attention in the literature. There's tens of thousands of scientific papers on the benefits of mushrooms and the compounds in mushrooms, et cetera, of what we've discovered so far, right? But it hasn't quite gotten the same love as vegetables and animal things, right? In terms of understanding of those kingdoms. So, I mean, there's all the things we do know about mushrooms, and then there's all things that we're going to learn as well, which I think is just as exciting, right?
I think two mushrooms have skyrocketed information to the top. We'll see what you think I'm going to say. Number one is lion's mane has become a gateway to everything because it's shown that it increased nerve growth factor, working with conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, mind-body coordination, improved memory, things like ADHD, things like that.
Providing compounds that children make, in high amounts,
exactly.
Those sphingolipid fats that are in there.
Myelin sheath.
Healing the myelin sheath, just finding those in lion's mane was a fairly recent discovery, in terms of the timeline of how natural products, how long it takes to get a good understanding of them sometimes, right?
Yeah.
It's, I think about maybe a decade ago, don't quote me on that, but it wasn't that long ago that they really, I think 2009, I think I have a paper out of Japan that they're really starting to talk about those compounds, or 2006 would be some of the earliest stuff. So after 2000 is when we really started to get an understanding of some of these things and what's actually in the lion's mane and what's been discovered so far, 18 or so different compounds that are identified in the known mechanisms of action now that are in there. And that's just scratching the surface, I think. Yeah.
And that's for me, when you talk about that. So lion's mane at normal doses is, if you could think about it, just a generalization as improving your overall nervous system, which then is, the nervous system is tied to your endocrine system. So all the hormones and everything. Like, for instance, give you an instance, when you talk about stress, a lot of people will say, what happens first? People say stress hormones, but that's not what happens first. Your nervous system gets enacted. It stimulates then the production. It stimulates a basic whole mechanism change in your body into basically, say, stress mode. You're stressed. It's a nervous system response that flushes out the hormones, and then the whole thing goes up. Your blood sugar is spiking, your senses are going really, your mind doesn't function the same. It's all focused, whatever. Your digestion, your immune system's all is shut down for now to get all the blood flow to your arms and your legs, and you're ready to fight or run. Okay, so that's basically normal functioning. Is lion's mane is to help you better cope with potential stressors and what's happening in your nervous system with the myelin sheath. But then, so that's that one. That's made it a huge thing. And higher doses is different. If you experiment with higher doses of lion's mane, it becomes more like the other mushroom I'm going to mention, which has become big in microdosing with magic mushroom or psilocybin. And there's all different types. So you got to watch because some are way stronger than others. And people don't realize that even at microdosing levels is that one. So if you look at it this way, this is if I simplify it, lion's mane is to improve the nervous system and thereby your whole physicality. If you're thinking about your body physically, even the way that it's affecting your nervous system to improve your mind, people think of lion's mane as these physical effects that change your mind. Whereas when you look at psilocybin or magic mushroom, it's to literally see through the mind. So basically, psilocybin is used properly, and that's the problem. If you just anybody use it, it's entertainment, it can be problematic because someone's not ready to see through the mind. So there's one improving the functioning of the nervous system affecting the mind, and there's one actually seeing through the mind. At high doses, lion's mane can help you in a more gradual way than, say, lion's mane at high dose to see through the mind. When you microdose with magic mushrooms, I wouldn't call that seeing through the mind. I would say that is sort of some of the obstructions that you have around yourself that you don't see clearly because there's all these protective mechanisms you go through, or all these judgments you make for you don't even know why, but you do, is they kind of drop a bit, right? Whereas the higher doses, because then there's a medium dose where they call them silly and that, everything's silly and lights and all that kind of stuff. Then there's the more heroic doses, which basically I wouldn't call them that people say enjoyable or anything. That would be the doses that are taking you on these trips that basically help you to what the ancients say, see through the mind. Problem again is if you're doing these things by yourself and you're just experimenting and you're not ready for these things, then you can have some severe type of reactions that are more individual to you, especially say teen years and development of the nervous system, is that, it could break the mind. Instead of seeing through the mind, it just sets up more obstructions. So that's where I feel like these two mushrooms together, of course, reishi and cordyceps and turkey tail, all these things are huge. But those two mushrooms together, I think, are changing the whole way that everybody thinks about what are mushrooms offering in this world? What actually are they? And then how do you use them properly so that you can see through the mind and improve the mind at the same idea, right? At that level. And then meditation and these different yoga practices, or sometimes just being in nature or the zone for an athlete, is taking you even beyond that, where you're not trying to see through the mind and you're not trying to improve the mind. You're just relaxing, like letting go. And that's going to change, get back to the mitochondria. That's going to affect the mitochondria because everything about letting go. So for instance, there's in the Dharmic world, there was a teacher, a very high sage called Nagarjuna. A lot of people know they're maybe out there. And his key student was Aryadeva. And Aryadeva had these statements about when you're trying to go deep, right? And you can break it down into modern ways of thinking. And to me, it's all about letting go. So the first one is he says, firstly, you need to basically let go of non-virtue. And you think, oh, that's pretty judgmental and all. No, it's not about sin or all that kind of thing at all. It's more just about what is unskillful to you. And if you could take that right down at whatever level you're ready to hear it in dietary advice or exercise. Do I actually move at all? Maybe that's the problem. I don't move. I mean, a sedentary lifestyle is huge, right?
Yeah.
Or do I eat crap that is affecting my mitochondria? Because sedentary lifestyles, again, you brought that up with energy, mind, body, energy. Sedentary lifestyle and nutrition are huge things that can affect your energy levels.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it's hard to make changes too. Sometimes, I was having a conversation with a loved one recently, and this person was talking about changes they were going to make. And they said, this is going to be hard. Yes. It's going to be hard to make these changes. And, of course I'll help support that person, whatever they need. If I can offer any insights or any things I've gleaned from the nutrition world through experience and exercise as well. And it can be hard, but if there's something wrong, then there has to be a change that's made, right? If there's energy, is not steady throughout the day, or just energy's not there in general, then there's changes that have to be made. And part of that is cleaning things up a little bit.
You mentioned something good there that ties with that, is that, say, if you want to see the difference between whether you're in stress mode versus whether you're in non-stress, like parasympathetic mode, at ease, would be, do you need to control things? Do you need to be certain about things? And in the East, they especially talked about this forever, is that idea about letting go, because that's a difficult one for like you're saying, because that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. Things like that is uncertain. Mm-hmm. The whole idea is you don't know if it's going to be hard or not. It's just that it's so uncertain that freaks people out. And even at that core level, is that going to affect my survivability or my ability to thrive if I open myself up to things that are not certain? So the idea then is stress mode is being comfortable with uncertainty. If totally flexible and pliable in that uncertainty, if we can get into that stage where things just flow off you, and then it's more like the mind of a child, because a child doesn't have to be certain. They're exploring. If we can learn to explore again, that affects us right down to the core level. Like they say, do something that scares you every day. Like it could be tiny, weeny thing, right? Because fear is relative. So you say, oh, that, you know what? I would normally not play that game with that person because I think they'll beat me or whatever. Just play it. Who cares? Yeah. The only way we get better at that game is actually by playing it. And you know what? The idea about stress is we take ourselves super serious. And that's where I feel, okay, we talked about this. I talked about this before, is you meet these people that think everything has to be super serious. Everything's really serious. So the whole idea of birth and death and all these things has to be really serious. Why does it have to be really serious? That's your conceptual mind trying to tell you that it needs to be in control and you need to plan this and everything needs to be in control and everybody has to do what you're said. That's a stressed out kind of way of thinking. So we're taught to actually be quite stressed out because we're loaded with facts that make us think that we got some type of control in uncertainty. So again, back to the simplicity of it, because that's what I think we're trying to do on Swallow the Truth, right? Is to make all these complex ideas simple in the end. So the simplicity of it, for instance, in the mitochondrial idea we're talking about, the simplicity of it with physicality and aging would be, are you more in catabolic breakdown mode, where you're releasing compounds that are breaking down your body, you're not absorbing, not assimilating, everything is counterproductive to healing and everything.
Which requires mitochondrial energy just to perform 100%. That function. So now the mitochondria are pissed off because they don't like the job they're going to do, right?
I like that.
That's man, good. This is what I'm doing now. Got to clean up this crap that this guy's producing. Yeah. You know, I'd rather be, whatever, fueling the muscles to do something proper, right? Like,
So it's an RM, a resentful mitochondria.
Yeah. You don't want resentful mitochondria. That's the last thing you want. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then those little guys can probably talk to us and be like, okay, we're going to make this guy angry now. So nobody likes him anymore. No, we're going a little bit off there.
No, but that's kind of interesting. If you think about this a funny way, if you think of them like they have personalities, if mitochondria is getting irked because you're giving it a crappy environment, you're making it do detox catabolic functioning instead of building and all this creative stuff, it's breaking everything down, then it releases these compounds that damage itself. But is it actually damaging everything, not just itself? It is, because when it damages itself and other ones that are like it surrounding it, it's causing us pain. And one of the big ones with mitochondrial dysfunction is leading to heart disease and cancer and breakdown of your immune system, all this kind of thing. In the ancient ways, they spoke about it more simply. When they talk about things like chi and prana and lung, or pneuma or spiritus, all these different languages and different ancient ideas, they were talking about your force, like your vital force. And if you think about that, your vital force on a physical level is manifesting as your mitochondria and how they function. Mm-hmm. So that's tied to your entire immune system. They would be like the nodes of power that are generating force that then creates a field around you, electromagnetic and everything, that is engaging in the outside environment and the internal environment to protect you against potential negative forces, but also to get you in sync and symbiotic relationship with other positive type forces that are building the entire universe. That's not esoteric. That's the entire world is built of stories and forces and energies, if you want to call them, and awareness. And if that's the ancient way of thinking, and then you have to put that in practice. So if you say you put a meditative practice together, you see that affect your life. You see it affect your energy. You see it where things, they'll call it a miracle, that this whole thing, you don't have a cancer anymore, I can't believe this, all that kind of stuff. And you think, but if the ancients, they didn't label everything. So that's the thing. They talked about everything as conditions and flow and juxtapositions, that nothing was stable. So they already knew the fact, what quantum physics says today, that not even for one moment, because the idea of a moment is, you can get really tricked on this, but not even for one moment is anything static. Everything is in a constant state of flow, which to anything that you're trying to grab onto and make solid in your life, ideas or things, is very stressful if you are trying to grasp onto something that is constantly, like for instance, if you try to grab onto water in a pond, you can't do it. After a while, it's going to stress you out. You can't get any of it. You know what I mean? That's what we literally are trying to do with our thoughts and our feelings, is grab onto stuff inside and outside of things that are in a state of flow. That's actually stressful because you're trying to make something certain that's uncertain, and something that is a static single thing that's not that. It's actually a juxtaposition or many things in combination in a state of flow. So why am I talking like this? Well, flexibility is the key thing. And if you in order to be flexible, we have to let go. This is the hard part. We have to let go of all these really rigid ideas and even physical stuff. For instance, you in this is a good one, I think. You as a triathlete, right? So you had to learn different ways to position your body and everything to make things more effective and less energy draining, right? When you're swimming or cycling with that. But then say, okay, you've got it. Now you've got it. You've got your nutrition down. You're watching how everything's going. The supplementation's all great. You got the body movements perfect, so you feel like you can go maximal distance without getting tired. And you guys, that's what you guys do, right? You're tweaking it if you're good. But then say you get an injury. Yeah. And that injury now throws you all off, and you got to actually relearn a ton of stuff to make yourself most efficient while that injury is in play. Maybe it will never go away, right? Maybe you lost a toe or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you have to do that. So then that idea about being hyper flexible as an athlete, if you actually want to do well and excel, or you can complain and say, I lost a toe, I can't do this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And even on a surface level, it's like, there's many top athletes in all sports will find new coaches. They work with their top level coach, and they get to the point where they just kind of feel that, okay, this is the end of the relationship. And a lot of the times that's a totally normal thing in high level sports for a coach to be like, great, we've gotten this far. It's been a pleasure working with you. And the athlete, is resonating with a different approach that another coach is offering, and then they move on. And those athletes don't just fail overnight. They very rarely, do worse. They often do better because they're constantly improving themselves. But they had the wherewithal to recognize that it's time to adapt and change out of where I am now, and to move into a more powerful state. Something.
I like what you said, because so ancient ways, they, number one, talk about know thyself. Number two, the guru-disciple relationship, or what do you want to call that? That was normal. You would have a certain teacher or guru or whatever, or lama, that you go through for a certain period of your life to teach you what you wanted at that level. Then they would typically, a good teacher-disciple relationship, the teacher and the student or disciple would figure out it's time to part, to go to a different guru that specializes more in that, or specializes more in practice. So that, it's interesting because the athlete-coach relationship is very much just keeping in line that ancient relationship of teacher-disciple. So here's what I think, because I have all these views that come in my mind. You need to play with ideas. But the YouTube generation, all of us, we're getting caught. It's not a generation where it's just an age group. It's all thinking that you can learn everything off YouTube and that you can bypass everything. Or the idea that you don't actually get really good at anything. You just say, I can look it up on YouTube. I can look that up on YouTube. So you never feel that sense of completion that you have when something is actually integrated into your entire being. Mm-hmm. So meditation's obvious. You can see those benefits. But a skill set, if you have a skill set. So why am I talking about this? Okay, confidence is a big thing. If you lack confidence and then you blame it on other people why you haven't succeeded, all these different things, that can really be a serious problematic event, so to speak, or ongoing duration of an environment that is not conducive to mitochondrial functioning. Because when this is simple. I've thought about this a lot. If you lack confidence in yourself, if you don't feel that you can remember things without looking them up, that sets you up for people controlling you, number one, for feeling like you are controlled, resenting all those different things, but not feeling that you have the strength or the confidence to do these things. That sets up the stress hormones, the nervous system response to stress. You build on that, and then all the things about breakdown and aging related to stress and all the diseases that come with stress, because you're breaking down your vital force mechanisms, has to do right at the level of the mitochondria. So again, if you look at them as personalities, it's easier to understand. Because if you try to remember all the biochemistry of all these different things, and you think, oh, they learned this or this, and all these factoids, that's the mind trying to grab on these cool facts as concepts, and then acting like now you know about it, but we don't actually integrate it into our system. And I think that is a big dilemma in these times, is we're not integrating things. We're not gaining mastery of different things, even small things. So we lack confidence. We don't trust in our ability to critically think through things, which creates more stress. So everything that preaches that you need to rely on others for everything and not to be self-reliant is stressful. Because then you're always dependent upon people that you don't need to be dependent on. But having said that, then everything is part of an interdependent whole. But if you're not functioning properly, you're just going to go along with it and get swept up in currents that are not good within health and everything else. So the idea is that is going to set you up for a stress mode ongoing. The mitochondria is going to respond by producing compounds that basically make you deficient in energy, not only not producing energy, and then you get all the different metabolic concerns. Or if you're just an athlete, you can't perform like you would. But I think cancer is a big one now. And all these rapidly developing cancers and out of the blue cancer they can't treat. That's huge. And that has to do, in ancient times, they would look at that again, is your body is trying to do something and trying to signal something. What is going on? Why is your body producing cells in an abnormal rate above and beyond what it could? If they knew that at a genetic level, they would have fixed it already. It's been going on for decades, right? So it's something else. Could it be that we're so toxic, we're so stressed, that we're sent into this, whatever cancer is being produced, as some type of mechanism of defense that doesn't end up being defensive because we don't change what we need to change when we think we should respond? And I feel like,
there's the metabolic theory of cancer, which has, not an oncologist, but it's been essentially, it's taken very seriously now, that opinion that it's a metabolic disease. And, metabolism of everything in your body is, again, dependent on those little mitochondria guys that are there powering everything, right? So if you have metabolic dysfunction, you have mitochondrial dysfunction. So yeah, here we go, right back to I had a quick metaphor I wanted to say too, which is when you're trying to adapt and change to improve yourself. I was just thinking, you can kind of think of it like a mountain bike. And the reason I think about it like a mountain bike is because you can go buy a mountain bike and you can go mountain biking and you can get good at mountain biking. But then the next step is to know how to tune the suspension and know how to tune the rear suspension and how to find the tire pressure to make sure it's perfect, to raise your handlebars up or down, to get comfortable in the saddle. And then when you're mountain biking on the same trails that you always have before, you can say, oh, I know my PSI is correct in the back. I don't have to worry about that jump. It's fine. Or that little bump over there, it's totally good. Oh, the fork, I'm not going to damage my fork that I just spent X $100 on because I've got the suspension pressure set properly. So now I'm working within the range of that suspension. So the entire, and I say this because recently I was like, okay, I need to get to learn the mountain bike suspension system more because I understand bikes in general. I can do, a little bit of tweaking here and there, but I said, I got to get more in tune with this and it's just made the whole experience of mountain biking better because you become more one with that. You become more one with the bike, and you could think of, in a human sort of analogy, you could think of yourself as becoming more one with your body and knowing that those things in there are working. So then you have the ability to go ahead and do what it is you want to do that day. So
you brought up a good metaphor. So the metaphor is an analogy. Got confused. In ancient times, they always used, because they didn't have bikes per se, right, but they used the horse and the rider, becoming one. And anybody who's in horseback riding understands this, especially dressage, where you have the same horse. Really difficult if that horse gets injured or dies, whatever, to go to another horse. Right. Is that in order to get so their whole idea was top down, right? So we think that matter builds everything. That's the modern way of thinking. which is an ancient way of thinking under the school called the Travaka, and that was thousands of years ago, which was considered the lowest level of thinking, where matter built everything and awareness and consciousness came with matter. But then trying to treat, so everything we try to treat in modern times is treating matter. Okay, the ancient way was, we've talked about this, was mind, the nature of mind, awareness, down to consciousness, and then energy in that, whatever we're going to call it, flowing, and then into matter. And matter is just basically like a dimension, a more coarse dimension of awareness. So if you look at it this way, it's like, okay, what do? You always have a centering practice involved in how you are trying to heal, trying to find balance again. Because cancer and everything else is about, okay, imbalances. Obviously, intoxifications and everything have to do with imbalances. Inability to maintain that state of homeostasis and balance. So if you sit with the breath, because most people can't sit, especially with these devices constantly looking. That's okay, now finally I don't have to work on the device. Oh, what can I look up next? So it's constant distraction. In this case, it's finding the ability to first be bored. Like we were in the 70s. You first had to acknowledge there's a sense of boredom, say you're a kid. But then out of that comes creativity, and you're finding things to do yourself. And it was always things to do. People can't imagine things without a phone sometimes. So then you go say to sitting, where the whole purpose of this sitting now is to just sit and basically not identify with all the thoughts and all the feelings and everything that wind you up and that are driving this whole physical process of disease. And when they talk about horse and rider, back to that, is then the horse would be like the breath, because you're working with the breath. It's always there, unless you're dead. Mm-hmm. To first notice the breath, and then the mind that's aware of the breath is like the rider. So once you get it in meditation, where you're sitting there and that waterfall effect of all these thoughts coming out, you think, why am I doing this? This is ridiculous. Now that will mellow out to like a slow going river, and then the ocean awareness. Anyway, the idea is you just pay attention to the breath. Every time it goes off, there's no judging at all. You don't say, oh, I went off the breath, or yeah, I'm doing well, I'm on the breath. Because that's the conceptual part of the mind, trying to gain control again. And it's losing that relationship of horse and rider becoming one. Mm-hmm. So if you just keep pulling back lightly, and then the mind or the rider is joined with the breath, and then it's as if the breath is disappearing. And you don't say more than this, but it's basically this practice or doing it yourself. Why would you do that? Because that is going to bathe the entire system in relaxation, number one. The more relaxed you are, the better. And then energy will come back. It's not all your thoughts and feelings and matter and defense mechanism not being all over the place. It's more like just back to the breath. So whatever you're suffering from right now, but out of that also comes, as you get more into practice with that, the ability to see things like you are good at with in being a triathlete, is noticing when something's off, when something's not in balance. And just the subtleties of it. I had this food today and it did this to me. I mean, sometimes it's super easy when you get really mucusy after you eat a certain food. That's a problem. But a lot of times that's the things we're addicted to, so we keep doing it. Mm-hmm. But that's setting up some kind of heavy situation in your whole body that's going to affect you. So this idea of horse and rider, getting in balance, that centering practice, we talk about this, and we're going to keep talking about this a lot. That was something they took for granted in the ancient schools of medicine that you were already probably doing, because they were usually tied to some type of contemplative tradition. We've talked about this before. I can refresh it. Is Ayurvedic system is tied to the Vedic tradition, Vedic, which has a lot of different types of practices. It's not monolithic, meaning one thing. And then there's the traditional Chinese medicine, which we both love as well, and that is the Taoist system of yin and yang. You know, that symbol and qi and all that kind of. You learn these concepts that have become part of our language,
and they're important concepts because oftentimes in Western life we're not even exposed to these concepts. No. So it's one of the things you can't be aware of it until you've been exposed to it, right? So that's one of the fun things about my foray into studying Eastern medicine is it's opened my eyes, and I've taken that knowledge from the Western medicine that I've, been sort of immersed in for sort of 2 decades, and especially in around nutrition and sports nutrition, and performance. And now it's weaving in this whole other aspect of the yin and yang. It's so important. It's, the body just doesn't, the balance has to be there. And I mean, we all know that, right? But it's also really hard to do, especially in society today, because again, not to go too far off track here, but it's very easy to go way too much one way, be way too sort of complacent and for lack of a better term, lazy and do nothing. Or it's very easy to go the other way too and just be nonstop, go, 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 go. And it's the hardest thing, I think, for people that are at one end of that spectrum to creep back towards the middle, right? And it's just as hard if you're at one end or the other, right? It can be a big challenge. But
that's why we think it's crazy in the world, things that happen. It's happening inside the body in a different way. With war and all that kind of thing. It basically, you go through a state of peace that ends up in war. There's always these swing back the extremes. Why does it have to go to the other extreme? It's the nature of being caught up in the whirlwind that we think of as ourselves, of thoughts, feelings, habitual stances, that there's always this right or wrong. It's not about the blending, that middle way, or it's not even about a balance. It's about being beyond that, like the eye of the storm. We talk about a lot, where you're not caught up in each thing. And this is where I think this is really interesting. The modern way is typically still competitive, even when you talk about psychotherapy and things like that. Is that, and I'm not saying that's not good or anything, I'm just saying that that's not an ultimate type of way, is because whenever you set the mind up in a competitive thing, it sets up a this or that. And one's bad, one's good. And that's just not the way things are in reality. There's always circumstances where things will not play out as good or bad the way you think they are. So it sets the mind up in a bit of confusion. You're fighting back and forth thinking, I'm not good enough. I need to be more this. And then there's always this part that you're kind of like suppressing. I'm building up love to suppress hate, all that kind of thing. It is a form of competition where you still believe in the two, and one is dependent on the other. So each thing has its polar opposite. Hate and non-hate, all that kind of thing. The concepts are still alive. They're still there, and they're still waiting for their chance to jump out, like that white wolf, black wolf idea. Maybe I should bring that one back in for a second. Is the story of the white wolf and the black wolf that's told, we've heard it's First Nations tradition. I think it's Apache. I can't remember. Is that the white wolf and the little grandson, the grandfather says there's a white wolf and a black wolf, and they're vying for strength and superiority within your mind. However you want to word this, you can word this differently. And the black wolf represents hate and hostility and all the things you can think of as negative, right? The way they tell it. And then the white wolf represents all the virtuous qualities, right? And then the little grandson says to the grandpa, says, which one wins? And the grandfather responds in the way that we commonly tell this, whichever one you feed. And so that is the Western way of thinking about how you be virtuous versus non-virtuous, whatever you want to call that, good or bad. And then we are fighting with that. But that's not actually the way the story was told. In ancient cultures, they did not think that way in their deepest levels. They didn't. They thought about the idea of this interplay between these forces within. And they said the black wolf, it can represent in its negative way, same as the negative, the feminine qualities of wisdom, openness, all-inclusiveness, can have its negative side of clinging and all that kind of thing. And the masculine side of this aggression, hostility, everything can have the confidence, piercing, penetrative kind of way of thinking. So there's the positive and negative poles of even active and passive forces that they label as masculine and feminine. In the ancient times, they knew they were metaphors and they used them appropriately. And there is these both sides. So what you're trying to do is break through all that. So they said in other way of telling it, which is the way they did tell it, was that which one wins. And it's not about that. It's not about which one wins. It says is you feed both. Which one do you feed? You feed both. And what do you mean? Well, if you feed the white wolf, yes, all the virtuous qualities and everything will come out. And there's sense of completion. If you feed the black wolf, it's not vying for your attention. And then all its good qualities, again, of the courage, of standing up, of ferocity when you need it, is all there. And they're imbalanced. If you don't feed the black wolf, which you think, I can never give it any sense of thought in my mind. Because this is what we have a battle going on in our mind all the time with bad, good, all that kind of thing, and resentments and regrets, all that thing. If you feed the wolf in an appropriate way, this part of your mind, it rises up to the occasion for you and gives you positive benefits. If you don't feed it, it lies in waiting for whenever you are down and you don't even feel like being virtuous anymore, because then it's a feeling, and it leaps up, and then all the vices spew out. You've heard this when people are under duress or things like, they spew out stuff, and they talk, and because we haven't been feeding the wolf. We've been acting like there is a right and a wrong, and that's how you have to do it. But it's very individual how you flow. If you appreciate people and you feel compassion, you feel open, and you feel more then you're not going to do that. But if stress is often about me, and why I should feel this way, why I should feel irritated with you, why I should feel worried about you, why you make me agitated, why. That could be fine, like all these things that happen. But what they're saying in the ancient ways is that you're the one being affected, though. And we've made the joke oftentimes about the idea of that, okay, you're affected. So you're at a party. I like this one. And everything's great. This is feeling great. And then you look out the fence, there's all these people there. Oh my God, there's that person. They're kind of come to you and you go, oh, I can't get away. They come right to you. Oh, they're going to talk. And they talk. And you're like, oh, inside you're going, yeah. You're thinking, oh, I don't want to be here. That person may had the best time of their whole life, left feeling so refreshed, and you're completely wiped. So it's very relative. But how do you get rid of that? Well, it's about water off a duck's back. Secondly, why is that bad? Getting back to mitochondrial dysfunction again and the idea of stress. So then, what is stress? Why does it impact your energy? Why does it make you age? Why does it bring disease? And you think, okay, there's these levels of conditions. And you think, I have spasm, or I have irritation, or I have lack of flexibility, or I'm aging, or I have just different things pain, that kind of, you feel that at a certain level. And then now, even in modern ways of thinking, they've recognized that inflammation is under that. So even diabetes and everything else, inflammation has a core causal, or at least conditional, same, but still, you know what I mean? All these different conditions coming together, that it has a role in all these conditions: cancers, heart disease, diabetes, everything. But inflammation doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from catabolism. We've talked about that. So catabolism is breakdown of your tissue, or infiltration and breakdown. But that doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from lack of ability to maintain homeostasis, which is stress, physical, mental, whatever. And then what your body does is it thinks your body's basically thinking, so they speak, if you act like your body's another organism or another being, your body thinks, okay, I need to fight, or I need to run, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? Like a frog freezing or fake. Yeah, that kind of thing. Oh yeah, no. Like when you're obviously stressed. So you put all your energy then into these responses of fighting, which is hostility, of running, which is outright fear. A lot of things are hope and fear, right? You hope to maintain what you want and not get what you don't want. And then you fear getting what you don't want or losing what you want. That kind of idea. So hope and fear is engaged in a lot of these stress thinking. So then what does your body need when it's going to fight? It needs to have a lot of energy.
Resources. Right?
To the muscles especially your muscles. So the extremities, your arms and legs. So then, okay, you get that there, and you're going to run. Fine, you're going to run. But how often are we running? We're not. We're just arguing with someone, or just we didn't like what opinion or whatever they shut, and we're inside going, I wish I could say that. And then you get in faking. We'll talk about that in a sec. So your body then shoots up sugar. It shoots blood flow by like a hose, like you're going to shoot a garden hose. You just press it and it shoots farther. That's why your blood pressure goes up. It's trying to shoot your blood to the extremities, away from your organs. So all your organs in the central core are struggling then, because they're losing blood flow, energy, all that what you call your vital force is moving towards the extremities so that you can fight and run better, right? So then that's one. Your blood sugar shoots up, and because you need a lot of sugar. But again, what are you doing? You might just be irritated. That's a form of anger, frustrated, impatient. Those are forms of anger, distracted, form of anger. Forms of fear. What form of fear? You're a bit worried about what's going to happen. You're thinking of all the things that could happen. This could happen. That could happen. And I can't control this. I'm out of control. All those are just fears. You're not actually fearing for your life, but it's a lesser form of fear. And then the freeze response, I'm so uncertain. I don't know what to believe anymore. I don't know what to believe anymore. I just give up to whatever authority figure. Then you start trusting everybody, even if it's a silly podcaster. You start trusting everything and you don't take it into control yourself. And then when people challenge you on your belief systems, you don't actually understand your belief system because you just thrown yourself to somebody else. So you just dig your feet in stronger. And then you get emotional and you attack people because you don't know how to respond. These are human responses that happen when we lose control of the ability to think. That's the freeze response. The fawn response, so common, these two responses. They didn't used to call the stress response freeze or fawn. They just said fight or flight. Now they know it's freeze or fawn. And the fawn response is you just keep on faking it. So you are actually not being true to yourself. You're being inauthentic. That sets a cascade of changes in your nervous system, in the way you think about yourself, the way you think about others. You're constantly just appeasing people so that you don't get in confrontation because you don't want confrontation. Number one, you think of confrontation as a fight instead of an open discourse because we're all getting caught in this fight mentality. So the idea is, where do we relate in this? So you got blood sugar shooting up, you got blood pressure increasing, you got platelet factors increasing to clot your blood faster. And they think that's because if you're fighting or running, you might get cut and you need to heal it up fast. That sets you up for strokes and a whole bunch of other things, right? And then your mental functioning is all about survival, not about thriving and open-mindedness and connecting. It's all about destruction because it's me or you kind of thinking. So, and you can't think straight. So these are some of the things. Then all of the linings of your digestive tract, your respiratory tract, your eyes, your mouth, your nasal cavity, your genitourinary tract, all of that mucosal moat that normally protects you from the outside environment is considered non-essential because you're just fighting or running. And it basically breaks them down at a faster rate and doesn't repair them because you're not resting and sleeping. Then you make yourself susceptible to all these, call them energies and pathogens and whatever, or just things in your food that start absorbing into your blood. Then that sets up the stage for all of the different toxic type conditions, like what they call autoimmunity, connective tissue diseases, cancers, heart disease, skin reactions, lack of energy, lack of blood flow, clotting, all this kind of thing can be set up because your barriers that help you integrate, become like a symbiont with everything around you in a way, is they're breaking down. So now you're just susceptible to everything. And also mentally, you're not in the same, like for instance, when you're stressed and you're being inauthentic, you're actually, they've measured it, you're shrinking the fields of what they call your protective or your energetic fields, electromagnetic fields around you are actually moving closer to you. It's like when you're stressed, you feel it. You become really tightened and hardened and armored. It's happening around you and inside you. That's why it's hard to let go of because those responses are what do they call it? Self-validating. So you find what you think is the problem in the world to justify why you're having that reaction, but we're just aging ourselves on the spot again. So this idea, that's what stress is doing. It's insidious. We have way more than we've ever had. How do you function? And what do you think might be the worst one? What can you address first? Can you address your diet that might be stressing you and toxifying you? Can you address it from the exercise perspective? You need to move because we need to move because everything's about flow. If you stay static, things start to pool and that's where things build up.
Yeah, and we're going to mind. And then the mind, right? And we're going to talk about this in this episode right now. That was a great introduction for, right? The episode today we're going to talk about is stress and just facing it head on. Yeah. And where, I mean, because I had this conversation with my wife recently, and we were just talking about hormone testing and vitamin and mineral status testing and getting these medical tests done to see where you're at, to see where, okay, I want to get a baseline to see how I feel at this hormone level or with these micronutrient status levels. And so how do I feel with that? And then get tested again in 6 months. How do I feel with that? Well, what happened in those 6 months? Did you have an unfortunate event in your family? Did you have, something happen at work or whatever it is? Did you injure yourself and then you couldn't do your activity that is your stress relief thing? So underlying is the stress that's always affecting the body. And so all of these tests can be very good. They can be, they can help you validate what's going on in your health. But when you listen to people talk about hormone testing and nutrient testing and X number of hill repeats to maximize your strength to go on your, your first 10K or whatever it is. All of that, yes, that's all important, but that stuff's not going to be functioning optimally. Nothing in your body is going to be functioning optimally unless you have your stress under control. And so that was, we talk about stress a lot in these episodes, but this episode in particular was just, maybe the topic, the title will be stress, like head on or something, right? Because it always gets pushed under the rug, right? And you go and hey, I've listened to hundreds of, if not thousands of podcasts on nutrition and natural health. And I've learned so much, and I'm so grateful for all of those people that have amazing podcasts. But often the podcast will be going on. It's like, oh, we got to insert stress management here. And then it doesn't get done, and that's fine because there's experts, and they're often experts in their respective field, and they're not going to go into that category, and that's totally fine. You take that information and then you absorb it and you do what you will with it. But I think we're not often enough. That factor is so important, but it's not being respected the way it should be. And what you just said in that awesome introduction to stress and what it's actually doing to our body is, what is it doing to our body? All the things you just talked about. But one fun part of that too is, what are we allowing it to do to our body?
Yes.
There's a thought that I had last night, right? You can have all these things happening, and the way you perceive it and the way you perceive that stress and the way you process it, or just let it go and just not worry about it. You can have a very stressful situation happen to you, and over the years, as my meditation practice has improved, and it always improves, just like everything in life, if you just keep practicing, it really does happen. Water off a duck's back really does start happening. And you can see, and I'm not trying to sit on a high horse here. I'm just saying you can see people that will react to something, and you'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a stressful thing that they're reacting to. But the reaction to what's happened is almost always more damaging than what's actually happened, right? If you just sort of fast forward a year, does that really matter? Or fast forward to your deathbed, did that really matter? No, it didn't really, in the grand scheme of things. So I just want to emphasize, and we want to emphasize in this episode, how important it is to have a stress management practice of some kind, because that improves everything, and it'll actually give you a better understanding of your body if you're going to get some vitamin D testing, and magnesium testing is not great because only 1% available in your blood. The other 99 basically is stored in your muscle tissues and organs and different things, some in your brain of course too, but you're not going to get a clear picture. The water's going to be kind of muddy. You can kind of see what's at the bottom there. You're like, okay, yes. I think that's what I feel like this. And that's where I'm headed right there. But if the stress level is under control, that mud settles, right? And the water's clear, and you can just reach right down and just get what you're trying to grab, right? So those are things that do happen. And then we're going to talk about some solutions too. But what were you going to say?
I was going to say what you're saying now is, say you're listening to different things that people say in podcasts or whatever, or you go to lectures or you read a bunch of information, you're like a certain person, is if in the ancient way of thinking, if you don't analyze something, if you don't analyze it, leave it as it is. The conventional way of thinking and everything, just leave it as it is, and you go with the world, right? But obviously when you struggle, when you feel like you're struggling, you tend to want to figure that out. And if we stay with the world and you try to blame it on outside forces, right? Which there are outside forces, that still gets you caught up in the idea of not really analyzing what is the issue with myself, say. So they say, once you start analyzing, if that's where you want to go, then be prepared for everything that you think is the truth and real about yourself and everything, the interplay and the mind and its world, everything, is be prepared for that to start to fall apart. And that, again, we talked about this in other times, is the being comfortable with uncertainty. So then there's this level of now a subtle analysis. So you're starting to analyze. Is, for instance, you can take this right off the bat to show how little we might think that we know just by one thing alone, is that in science, it's been decades since we knew that if you start to look with microscopes and go deep at the cell, that none of that exists the way they think that we are taught. That's standard quantum physics. So beyond this popular idea that we're built of things and everything like that, that's been done for a long time. So then you go, okay, what do you do with that? Well, that's the whole thing. Is if you look at that and that starts to fall apart, you realize that every way you're thinking and behaving in this world, and it has to do with stress and everything else, health and stress and disease, is related to the way that you're thinking. So then if you think, okay, what can I do when you're talking about meditation, yoga, different practices, or just being in nature sometime, is if I start to look inside here, and that's where I talked about that Aryadeva Nagarjuna student, and he said, first just basically is you're turning away from non-virtue, which to me means not behaviors of mind, body, and speech that are not conducive to health and well-being of yourself. So this is very subjective, looking at what is it, and reading a lot's going to help, but just for yourself, what is not skillful. Then he said, secondly, is in the middle, dispel misconceptions of self. So then right off the bat, why are we so fixated and grabbing on all the ideas that we think of ourselves with our thoughts, our feelings, our habits, our stances, our overall ideas, and how we relate to everything in the world and our belief systems? Why are we so attached to that? And that's basically hope and fear get back in. You got to feel like you got some sense of control, some sense of certainty in the world that seems uncertain. That's fine. That's understandable, survival. But once you start analyzing, you see that that actually is what's is holding you back in a big, big way. And if we're just focused on physicality with a condition that you have, or your energy levels, or the fact that you feel like you're aging faster, or you're getting stressed, or all these different conditions you're getting, what the heck's going on? Just at that level. If you address it from a deeper perspective, which means analyzing your sense of self, the things that you need to let go of. Because even sense of self can mean all your likes, different likes and dislikes of food, or your like and dislike of doing fit physical exercise. All those things come into play with your sense of self. So if you can let go even tiny, tiny bits of that sense of self, it will impact your health, because they're like little eddies of tension built all through your whole system, mind and body. So say, pick one tiny thing, or if you can pick a big thing because you think it'd be easy, but not usually, pick a tiny thing of food, of the way you think about food, the way you think about exercise, whatever, and just flip it around. So think about mind, speech, and body. Speech in the ancient times encompasses the flow of energy and everything else, and your thoughts and the way you speak, it's all related as one. And then mind is your overall ability of awareness and consciousness. And then body is obvious to most of us, the physical manifestation. So if you can take that and say, okay, what do I do? And then he says, so you've got the first one, this is Aryadeva again. So it's basically turn away from non-virtue. In other words, let it go. Things that you don't think are helpful to you.
Mm-hmm. And that could be a nice, just a quick segue. It can be pretty powerful. We've all experienced that when we've let go of something or we've realized something, and then you have like a 180 shift in your mind sometimes. It can be just a small thing too, right? So like you say, just starting to let go of just the smallest thing maybe. It's just like, and this is just a random example. Instead of having, 3 double coffees today, I'm going to have one, and I'm going to become okay with that. Right. And just start somewhere that's easy. But I think we all, I remember when I was ending my racing career, running around Elk Lake in Victoria. I can remember like exactly on the 10K trail where I was just like, oh, I'm done with this.
Yes.
I'm done being competitive. And the feeling that I got from that was, there's no words for that. There's the relief is kind of the word. Yeah. But it's deeper than relief, right? Because it's just like your direction in life has gone from being this to just shifting a little bit over, and you're still going the same speed in life and everything's the same, but maybe it's a little bit sunnier on this side as well, right? Because you've been able to say, okay, that part was done, or that is done, whatever it is that you're releasing. It doesn't have to be big though, just a stepping stone along the way. I just wanted to emphasize that, just something small.
And the competition was great because it built you to what you were, but then you realize, I don't need this anymore. Mm-hmm. I just want to release into it. Yeah, I love that.
But then it comes back sometimes, because I registered for the BC bike race, which is a 7-day stage race. And I was like, I'm not competitive anymore. My wife's like, oh, so yeah, I thought you weren't going to be competing. I was like, well, I'm competing against myself. So I have to do, as soon as I'd like press click and, done the registration, I was just kind of like, everything kind of changed again,
but it feels good about testing yourself.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, it feels very good to have purpose again,
the
too.
Intensity from before.
100%.
With a more loose kind of...
Okay, only against myself now. Right? It's really, I don't care if I'm 100th or 26th, maybe I'm trying to get in the top 25, but it's me against me now, right? So when I go out, it's a personal journey to, and then there's a personal journey to improve myself, but there's also the journey that's in an event like that, that's highly, it's really tied to the community. There's so many groups involved. Being part of community events, whether it doesn't have to be sporting, it can be, volunteering at the senior center for, crocheting for things, for a fundraiser for Christmas. Just being part of community events is so important, right? And we're getting a little bit off track there.
No, because I can take that back into his statement. Perfect. So the first one was what you just said. So the first one is turn away from what is non-virtue. Mm-hmm. And then in the middle is dispel misconceptions of self, which is a big one because that's sitting with yourself in silence a lot. And then the third one is to go beyond all philosophical or biased, whatever views. In other words, so what you're saying is now that you go back after you've had some centering type of practice where it's not all about me, winning, you're going out into the community with a more open type of expression, physically, mentally, in speech. Everything feels more natural because it's not so tightened up against me versus them idea. Then you mentioned the community. Then it spreads in the community. So there's more we, less me kind of idea, right? So then it's a different type of feeling. And then he says, the last statement says, he who understands this, he or she, one who understands this is wise indeed. Wisdom, though, to them meant direct experience. Right. So you can fill someone full of facts, which is most of what our systems are built on, is facts and coordination, cognitive dissonance, right? Emotion and afflictions that come with those things where everybody has to think a certain way. Otherwise, you're ostracized. And even you do it to yourself. Why don't I think that way? So the idea is that's not human nature. That's not the way things are meant to be. That's not a state of flow. That's control, which is stress. So you think about all these people that you think are in supposed control, we're full of stress monkeys that want to prop themselves up like a paper tiger. I call it, this is interesting. If you want to get involved in stress, then make yourself and thoughts and everything around yourself that you have duration through time as a permanent being. Like when you were a baby, you're the same as you are. You were that baby. You can't find the baby anymore in that. So the idea of permanence is one thing to inflate, right? The fact of singularity, right? I'm a single permanent thing that moves through time, and then I'm independent of everything. You talk about inflating your tire in that one thing you're talking. This is a more negative way of looking at it. PSI is like an inflated paper tiger, right? So the idea is that's what they think of as we're inflating ourselves with all these beliefs and thoughts and everything, and we believe that we are this paper tiger. And then when you start doing these practices, is that the water off a duck's back thing happens. You see the idea of how wonderful things can be without being in control, which is where if you want to look at it, the idea of the lotus. The lotus grows in muck and it comes out beautifully. So that life without this clinging, really strong sense of self is actually beautiful because like you said, when you go back into it, there's more of that sense of it outflowing, sharing. It's not about me against them or this against that or ideas or tribe. It's very much about, okay, flowing in the moment kind of idea, right? We're all can practice this. Nobody's perfect until you start to really let go. The other thing I like about that is say that you're in the meditation that you think, okay, meditation is about letting go. It's not about all the techniques you're using. It's about simply getting where you just let go. And then the idea is, a lot of us think that we relate to each other. We're trying to find people that are like us, right? That's just tribalism. That's competition because you want to have more support against the other one that doesn't think like you, right? So that's us getting tied in the whirlwind part of ourselves. Emotions, thoughts, ideas, ways of reacting, ways of being, ways of looking, everything. And then thinking other people that do have those same behaviors are like us. But if you think about it, they're not like us because you'll find all these differences you're not. And that causes all this conflicting kind of ways of thinking in your mind, which sets up more stress. So you feel anxious and distressed all the time. That's why we have so much, I think, in this time. Instead, meditation teaches you that instead of being caught up with things appearing in space, even thoughts and everything, emotions, everything, like things appearing in space, it allows you to see what it's like to be more like space appearing as things. So in the space, in the gap between thoughts and feelings and clinging to those is where we all relate because we all are part of the openness, like that blue sky idea. It's not an esoteric thing. When we're still and calm and not caught up in our thoughts and feelings and everything, if you think about that and we fully let go, that's where we all mesh. That's where the world can change, because that's where we all find complete commonality in the freshness of the moment that is between all those thoughts and thinkings that have been conditioned into us, whether we know it or not, through many. For instance, in the West, there's a book called that you can read, which kind of goes to show you how we're affected, whether we think we are or not, by different religious belief systems that swayed back and forth, and different philosophical systems that swayed back and forth. Because it built our society. Every society has these same kind of things going on.
Right.
Other societies have been built more on this open principle, right? That's why I got drawn to the Tibetan system. They were kind of secluded from the world for a long time, but still those systems can go off because mechanisms of control build up. But if you build a society on the idea of getting direct experience with openness, you're the opposite of stress. Like if we want to talk about deep stress and dealing with stress at a core level, the more that someone can let go in each moment, it could be for 1 second, but once you taste of that, you'll never ever forget it.
Yeah. No, this is very true.
Right?
Yeah. It's in meditation too. Once you've reached a point of, and this can happen like very quickly for people to get a taste of meditation. I think I shared this in another podcast, but I remember one of the very first times I was 20 years old and I was walking back along the beach in the Gold Coast of Australia. I worked in a Thai restaurant, and then I went over to work in a nightclub, cleaning up after all the drunk people and finding lots of money on the ground, which was great. And I walked back along the beach, whatever it was, 2 or 3 in the morning to where I lived in Surfer's Paradise. And I remember just walking along that beach one time and just having the feeling I should just sit down and just be breathing because the waves are right there. And there's powerful meditation can happen around water. You and Marcus and I have had conversations around that, and it's so cool. But I remember sitting down, and this was 22, 23 years ago now, and I remember getting up from that and not realizing how long I had been there. I had no concept of time. So this ability of meditation to help you, you can get a taste of it pretty quick if you just sit down and you just start breathing and you just. One way is to start thinking about where you're holding tension in your body, right? That's a really nice one. I still do that all the time. Like I meditate daily and I still do that all the time if I'm sitting there and I'm just trying to relax and it's not happening as quickly. I'm like, okay, where is that tension being held? Is it being held in my foot? And then you go through your body and all of a sudden you're like, oh, what the heck? My left shoulder was like sitting like this for some reason. What's happening there? Right. And then you can melt it down and just getting that little insight into it can be very, very powerful. And it doesn't take long, just to get your first little sort of, what was that?
And what you just said too, when you said it, it's your mind is looking through your body, that type of idea, to see where the tension is. And then you relax off it with the mind and then the body relaxes.
Yeah.
So inevitably it goes back to mind again. The tension is health in the mind. This is the easiest one for me because I injured my lower back bad a few times when I was young, went over a cliff. Then I got flipped over the goalie. I was defense and I was impaled on the spike was still in the net. And then I was carried off the ice, right? So you have all these aches and pains.
Wuss,
yeah, right? is the idea is when you have a lower back injury especially, and then you're doing something and all of a sudden you feel that tweak, that you've done something wrong. Yeah. And then the best thing to do would just be to stop right there and then just breathe through it and relax, because what your mind is going to do, and I've had that, is that your mind spazzes around the back spasm and makes it way worse. And then you could be held up for days when really it would only lasted maybe a few hours if you hadn't got. So most of the tension is the fear of it getting worse. So the idea then, okay, what does that mean? Imagine back to everything we've been talking about the whole time, about cellular function and respiration and energy and all these things and all these diseases forming. If you could sit back and say, get in touch with that eye of the storm idea, where you're not caught up in thoughts and emotions and all this kind of thing, and you feel like that your energy is fully focused, and you can tell when that happens, and relaxed, then the sky's the limit for how you can impact your state of health and how you can affect your energy levels. And we call that, when we talk about that SOAR response, spaciousness, because that, this is what you don't feel spacious. So it goes like a spaciousness, openness, authenticity, and relaxation. You don't feel spacious when you're stressed. You feel really constricted in your mind, body, and everything, because your whole body's tensed up. So that's the opposite of spaciousness. You don't feel open because you tend to roll back to all the ways of thinking that are about survival and past and everything, and anticipating the future according to what you have skill sets with the past. Like if the only thing you have in your toolkit that's saying is a hammer, then every problem looks like a nail and you start smashing it, whatever. So the spaciousness and openness is not there. Authenticity is not there because you don't feel that you have a touch with the nature of yourself. You're more about survival of the things you think you own, including your body, right? Or your ways of thinking. All the things that you think you have ownership of, they're under attack, but those aren't actually you. Those are things that you think are you because you grab onto them, and this is the way you define yourself. Identification is rampant now. It's such a silly thing because they've known since ancient times. Whenever you continually try to keep identifying and differentiating everything, all it does is set everything up to go to war. So the idea of what we're doing right now, everything is set up for a type of war type of mentality according to the sacred traditions. So we have to let go off this identification within ourselves. You don't have to get caught up in the world doing it, but within ourselves, we keep doing it. We're not authentic, right? And we're not true to ourselves. And when you're authentic, you feel a lot of energy because you feel true to the sense of who we are in this world and how our place. And then you don't feel relaxed when you're stressed, obviously, because stress is the opposite of relaxation. So relaxation is a massive one that everything else comes from.
Yeah.
And you'll see it in all your health. You'll see it in conditions that the ability, okay, here's an interesting too, right? The placebo effect in some of these studies they've done, people that can relax more effectively can heal themselves.
Yeah.
People that can't relax effectively will end up wound up and caught up in different conditions going further and further and further. When you get diagnosed ethically that you're going to die or whatever, you got this terrible condition, two ways of taking it. Obviously, we're speaking of something that we already know deep down. But if you got caught up and say, oh, the doctor said I'm going to die, nobody else is 70% survival or 20% survival rate, whatever. Or you just say, well, that's just statistics. Mm-hmm. I can be that other statistic. And if you fully believe that, if it's not a lie, if it's inauthentic, if we're doing this self-talk to ourselves, again, this is modern states of psychotherapy and that. And I'm not knocking, I'm just saying that, is that effective to feel like you're lying to yourself? Is it the truth that you fake it until you make it? I don't think so. Because if you keep on faking it, then you get caught up in a tendency of faking and not actually believing it. And then it sets up the polar opposites of I want to be this, I'm not this, or look at I'm acting this way. So that sets you up with feeling more inauthentic, which is a stress response. So the whole idea, again, yes, these techniques, the ancients would say, are gradual techniques. Mm-hmm. They can be helpful, but they're not always helpful. That's where you have to figure, where are you at in life? Are those things making me feel more inauthentic? If so, then look for a different technique. If they're not, and you just feel like you're starting to finally get controlled, then it's good. This is the idea that you're not skillful. Sorry, I'm going to say don't put so much weight on it. It's about skillful or unskillful. Mm-hmm. Then we start rolling through stress.
And then this is where we can enter into what we actually put into our body to help us with that stress management, right? Because there's three parts really of stress management. You can work on a centering practice, and that can be 5, 10 minutes, 3 minutes, doesn't matter. It's just isolating, not isolating, that word's too strong, just breathing and just being able to focus just on breathing. That's one way, whether that's a 30-minute meditation, a 1-minute meditation, a 10-second, a 10-minute, whatever. It doesn't matter. When you just start doing that regularly, that's kind of like the bottom of the pyramid, right? And then on top of that is, what you're doing with your body on a day-to-day basis. Are you able to, and if you're not able to get up and sort of go for a walk and do those things, then that's a rough situation you're in, but you'll get through that as well, right? If you focus on the other things, right? Which are a centering practice, sort of what you do on a day with your actual physical body. And then there's what you actually put in the body, right? And so natural supplements enter the via both sides of the stage right now, because they can be very, very powerful. You take, Eastern Ayurvedic medicine, and ashwagandha is at the top of the pyramid. Why is ashwagandha so popular in the natural health world right now? Well, because we've known for thousands of years that it's beneficial, right? Yeah. And so taking ashwagandha for a lot of people helps to regulate that cortisol hormone. So that's where natural supplements can be, kind of like a gateway into helping you, quiet the mind, reduce the stress aspect, and then that can help with meditation as well, or whatever it is, walking in nature. You can't, like I went for an overnight hike, 2 nights overnight with a friend in two friends in Strathcona recently, which is a big island here on the island. It's the main park inside of Vancouver Island, and I say inside because it's right in the middle. And I remember I was like, okay, there's a lot going on with work right now. And, I kind of felt like when I was leaving, I was like, oh, the family may kind of need me right now, but I know I've got a really strong wife and she, you go and enjoy yourself. And, on the drive out there, I was so excited to go. And the most exciting part of it was to be in a place with no connection to what we live in on a day-to-day basis. No, there's no reception out there. There's nothing out there. I bring an emergency GPS thing that I can use to satellite thing that I can use to call for help. But I mean, that's not something you just scroll on Instagram or something with, right? It's a very serious device for just getting help. And I realized that was, when you get out there and you're just walking and hiking in nature, and yes, it can be strenuous. We went to the top of Mount Tom Taylor, which is a pretty high mountain here, and we had a beautiful view, but it was just getting out there and just everything just drops and releases and just goes away, right? It was the aspect of being out there, and I've kind of lost my train of thought a little bit there, but it's the...
the 3 different parts, like the mind, body, and energy, it's speech.
Yeah.
You're focusing on all of them there, because breathing, if you, like when the old saying, just breathe it in.
Oh, it was just to say that you can't be stressed when you're out walking in nature 50 kilometers from cell reception. You can't be stressed. You don't have a choice other than to be right here in this moment, just with what you're doing and the people that you've chosen to go with as well, right? No complaining allowed. The people you've chosen to go with, you're just connecting with just what is present. And that's what, if you look at people like Eckhart Tolle and people that are more prominent figures, they'll talk about that, right? And it's so important to be present in the moment, and we can pay it lip service all we want, but getting yourself into a situation where you can, and you must be, and not in a bad way, must be, but you can be present with just right this moment right now. That was the thing, and that is the thing that I want to go into the woods to do, is just to be present with that moment.
And it's surprising how many people could still go to that moment, look out over the vast open sky, and be thinking about all the stuff they've done in their past. What do you do tomorrow? How do I do this? Not there at all. Yeah. And so presence, it's interesting because the deeper you go into all these different teachings over the years, because obviously I've been with the Tibetans for long, so the Indo-Tibetan and Chan tradition. But still, any of the different ancient teachings is the deeper you go, the more you realize it's all just about presence and awareness. And it's not about this idea of thinking about space in sense of extension, things all over the place and all this stuff you get caught up, including thoughts, because we give thoughts some type of thing. Yeah. We call it thinging. We're reifying thinging stuff. What is that? Instead, you get fully immersed in the openness and the appreciation of that moment, which is cool because then we go back to that statement, the 24 traits of highly successful people when they map those out, right? Yeah. And it wasn't about rich or anything, could be, but mostly about people that considered themselves happy and feeling that the 2 traits dominated. We've talked about this before because you were talking about this is that sense of appreciation. Gratitude is number 1. It beat all the other 23 traits combined in weight. So gratitude is the number 1, but you can't sell someone to appreciate. You can't tell yourself, I should appreciate. This makes you stressed out. So it basically is about that letting go and dropping. But from that comes that sense of the number 2 one, which beat all the other 22. So 2 traits dominate, was love of learning, which is curiosity, which is also listening or being present. So being present in a state of wonder through appreciation. So appreciation is like the shining. And then out of that, there's the sense of wonder and listening and being open. So it is that, again, that spacious, open, authentic, relaxed response. Yep. In meditation. And if you just hear about it and you conceptualize this, so that sounds great. Yeah, I heard about that. I heard about that SOAR response. I heard about meditation. But if you actually never taste of it, it is the same as they say peanut butter. If you go out in some tribal area that's never had peanuts, never had salt, and then you tell them about peanut butter and they can conceptualize, they know, so it's made of peanut butter. They crushed them up. They had salt. It's got a smooth texture, kind of like escargot or something. I don't know. If they've never tried it.
You're a smooth peanut butter
right?
guy. Okay,
Exactly.
I get it.
But once they have the peanut butter, you can't deny that. Even if it's a tiny, weeny taste,
oh man,
you understand it. And then the idea, getting back to another metaphor when we're talking about this experience say, of you on top of the mountain, just appreciating that moment in a state of wonder, fully present. That is such a massive impact on your physical health too, mental health, and your energetic health. And if you look at it this way, if you go, okay, before the metaphor, say, if you're trying to get imbalance again, imbalance, not imbalanced, is the simplest thing to do for most people is the idea of maintaining awareness and light touch on the breath. In other words, don't make it heavy and really focus and concentrate. It has to be so it's relaxed, sense of light touch on the breath. And whenever it goes away, just bring it back gently, lightly. No judging, because that's the whole part of the different mind. So you're getting used to this idea of non-judgmental, open awareness. So you do that through everything of the mind. So in the mind, it's obvious. You're using the mind on the breath. And then your mind starts to relax and open up and goes beyond itself, kind of idea, go beyond mind. And then the second one is with speech or energy flow. The breath is kind of part of that. It's like a bridge between mind and body would be the energy or the breath. So again, you focus on the breath while you're in motion. So one is breath while you're just in a space of mind. One is in motion. So if you're running or doing whatever you're doing, if you're staying with the breath, you'd be surprised that you know this, how much more you can do with effortlessness. That's part of being in the zone, which we both had that experience. Even when you're in so much pain and horrible, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's like the whole world opens up. And then with the body, anything you're doing, so that would be an energy. And then with eating and nourishing and all that kind of thing that you're doing is, again, stay with the breath. Because then you can be present with that. Eventually the breath kind of relaxes into itself. Then you're just there with whatever is in present. It doesn't matter what you're doing, eating or sleeping or whatever, right? Or resting. You're just right there. You're not caught up in thoughts and emotions and everything, even about the condition you think you have, which creates all this problems with your immune system and everything else. So you can't fight it. And then while you're undergoing some of these mainstream treatments that are very toxic, and then you don't have an immune system because you're wiping it out with stress and all these thoughts that you have, I'm going to die, I'm going to feel this, that's obviously making it worse. So that if you can find any moment of reprieve, which the breath continually reminds you that you have that reprieve, and that the breath will show you when you are stressed, because it's rapid and shallow kind of thing. And that just by looking at it, it can just calm it down. And then, so in other words, breath works through all three aspects, mind, body, and energy, because they are inseparable. I like to mention the Triskelion at this point. Yeah. Our Triskel, the ancient symbol, is you have the three spirals, and that would be for the mind. If the mind is in harmony, body, another spiral, in balance, energy, in a state of flow. Those would be the three aspects of mind, body, energy. But the center, everything is connected, three spirals, with the triangular form, which is the idea that it is all inseparable. We're talking about these different skill sets to work with and different ways of looking at something to affect your condition. And I'm not talking about, I think what you and I are getting at, we'd like to talk more, is that we're talking about serious conditions that you feel you have no hope with. That the ancient way of looking at that is completely different in so many ways with the modern way of thinking of that. And the modern way is being challenged significantly now. And even the fact that New England Journal of Medicine said back in 2009 or whatever it was, that more than 70% of studies that have been published cannot be duplicated by their peers. So what does that mean? It means that science is going through a real, crisis, because we're basically operating in science with the idea again that matter is everything, and that's been disproved so long ago. Or if you want to say, okay, you have to if you say it's not disproven, then you really have to redefine matter for me, because matter means nothing about what it did before. So then what does that actually mean for us? It means that all the systems set up in that way are being challenged. And the last few years that stressed a lot of us out and it's made for a lot of disease and things come forward for many different reasons, is that, okay, it's because we're going through that birthing period basically in a lot of ways returning to that song, A Return to Innocence, the idea that we threw out the baby with the bathwater idea. Well, by the way, I wanted that statement. I learned about that because you say it all the time. What does that even mean? They used to wash the baby last, and so the water be really dirty in the same tub, and then don't throw the baby out with the bathwater idea. So in other words, the innocence and the purity and the wonder and everything of a child, all the stuff you could think of as a metaphor, is you can throw at systems when they become corrupted, but don't forget a lot of the systems set out simple and become complicated and controlled by outside or inside forces, is that the inside impetus of a lot of these things, why they sustain themselves through time, even when they get corrupted, is that they did have a pure center or a sense of simplicity, which is that SOAR response. And then it just, when human beings and we get all of our different obstructions involved with our emotional inflictions, our cognitive dissonance, all these things, then we create these complicated, sophisticated systems. And sophistication implies some sense of higher intelligence in it, but it doesn't. It actually, it equates more with that sense of not being comfortable with uncertainty, trying to make certainty where there is no certainty, and causing afflictions thereby that then we perpetuate through time. So we get diseases. We get what right now I'm most concerned. Yes, the physical disease are manifestation, but if you look at it, the mental health could be the worst it's ever been. Yeah. And why is that? Well, you're not going to get answers from the same system that's actually can be causing what we're talking about. And why aren't more people speaking out about it then, if it's true that these systems, of course, they're not going to self-inflict blame on themselves, impose blame. But secondly, it's not say for instance, in medicine, it's not the doctors that control medicine. It's the regulatory bodies and the treatment companies. They're the ones that control what you can and cannot say, and that's propped up by the media. So you get into, this is not conspiracy, this is the way things work. And when you have a system that needs to constantly prop itself up, it's doomed to fail eventually, because like they say, once you set the truth free, we talked about this earlier, once you set the truth free, it's like a lion. It takes care of itself.
Yeah. Well, Ozempic is an example of this, right? Yeah, that's just, that drug is, there's a huge lawsuit against Ozempic, that company, because that's just one of the companies that makes that type of pharmaceutical. And, 2 years ago, a year ago, it was all sunshine and rainbows on every social media channel. And look, pharmaceuticals have their place. If somebody's really, really struggling with their weight management, it may have a place for them in a short-term use, which is exactly what pharmaceuticals are meant to be, how they're meant to be used, is for a short-term support where you really, really need it, right? But the label should have had all the warnings on it, because, those things were pretty much, known, all the negative effects that it's going to have on the body. So there has to be more transparency, but it's unfortunate because, and I bring up Ozempic because it's the same hand that gets played by large corporations, and it's not like they kind of dealt their own hand, right? They sort of, that's the way the game turned out, that they ended up at this point, and where are they going to go from there? Well, I mean, we need transparency. And where I'm going with this is that what we've seen in the last 4 or 5 years is an influx of people into the natural health industry, because, there's only so long that something can be propped up by, the house of cards can only be propped up by, there's only 52 cards in a deck. So once you get to, the 52nd card, what are you going to do after that? Especially when the wind blows and something, goes out from the bottom. But we've seen an influx into the natural health world, and we've seen that these ancient medicines work for the same, on a deeper level though, right? You have to remember, every ancient medicine that's out there, every natural supplement, especially some of the deeper, more sort of complex ones like mushrooms, for example, and shilajit, that are just wildly complex organisms. They're doing so many things in the body. It's not just this one little targeted thing they're doing. And so, if people are in a stressful situation, or they have pain too, I mean, that's a huge barrier. How would you, maybe some masters can do it, but it's going to be very hard to sit down and relax and breathe and try to form some type of a meditative practice when you've got pain in your left shoulder's frozen shoulder. I mean, I've never had frozen shoulder, and I've heard of people getting great results with some of our products for that, but that's painful. Have you ever had frozen shoulder? Like, yeah. I mean, I couldn't imagine trying to sit there, and relax into meditation when your shoulder's literally like throbbing and pulsing because it's in so much pain. So what can help there? There's lots of great natural products now. And we've taken Western medicine and we've applied those, we've applied science to the natural products, and they're validated now. Curcumin is such a potent anti-inflammatory. Stack it up against pharmaceuticals and it outperforms it for many things, right? So
you think about this then. We're going into another podcast or another topic, but I think we should. I feel like if you look at this, maybe this podcast is about what's the big difference between modern medicine in the way it's practiced today and the ancient medicines. And furthermore, maybe to look at how did we get here and who's benefiting and what's happening right now, why. And obviously these are our own open thought process. But when you were talking about ancient medicines have proved themselves over thousands and thousands of years, who knows how long, because they were so developed in certain treatises that must have been practiced far beyond that before they were written down. Because here's the thing about, if we look at history, I like the idea, his or her story kind of idea, is history is what we have seen typically by what we try to group together by little artifacts we find and make our own story, which is going to be it's going to have a lot of error built in. Yeah. Or sometimes we see written histories, right? We say, well, this is what as far back as writing. You think, okay, well, before that though, there were oral cultures. And we look at ourselves a lot of times as if we're more intelligent than these ancient cultures that were oral. They couldn't read or write. And that's actually, if you start thinking about this from many different angles, that's the exact opposite of the truth. So yes, they didn't have all these things to distract themselves like we do with all these devices and everything. So say there was a guest lecturer or some kind of sage or guru that's traveling, could have been, or you went thousands, you literally walked 1,000 miles to go see a person. Like how intensely motivated and devotional that was to see that. But that made you really, really wanted to hear what they had to say. Yet you didn't know how to read or write, and there wasn't any reader in writing. And there wasn't any recording devices, as far as all that kind of stuff wasn't there. So then what would you do? You would have to prime yourself to be able to listen in such a focused and disciplined way, an enthusiastic way, because you need to be enthused, right, in order to keep things in there. So these people would be, number one, they're giving of their time. They're willing to place that much importance on something. They're going to see this person, and they could be talking for 3 hours straight. Their attention had to be so intense, precise, but full of enthusiasm at the same time. You're likely not to hear that again, or maybe you're the only person in your whole region that went to see that person, so you don't have anybody to talk to. So how do you keep things alive? First, you have to have amazing memory and be fully focused, and you have to have diligence. Then you have to take back, and you have to take it into you. Like we're talking about meditation practice, right? You have to take it into you. So think about the memory that they had and the attention span. I listened on the radio, today's attention span. They were talking about
less than a goldfish.
Yeah, it's less than a goldfish, which is like 8 seconds. We're the same as we're the same as a goldfish, he said. 8 seconds. And then the researcher laughed, I think it's MIT. He laughed and he said, oh, sorry, I got that wrong. A goldfish has a 9-second attention span. So this is very sad and has to do with a lot with the culture of looking up things and then going from one thing to the next, right? So, but back in the day, Anna and my wife, we watched a thing on the Bhutanese and Tibetans in the salt trade before the big mining operations came. And that was part of their yearly routine. They'd go and hike long distances. They'd stop in villages. They had this one woman that was literally, from her memory, she was probably in her 80s, from her memory, she was reciting what would be the equivalent of the size of a Bible, right? She was reciting it word for word from memory. So then you think that's impossible. She's a genetic freak. No. It's not. It's the oral cultures when they're still alive, and that's what they focus on. And they have pure devotion to something. If we're so enthusiastic, we can do it. The human mind is way beyond what we think it is in every one of us. It literally is. It's so intense and so open compared to what we think it is in this expert culture, right? So then we get back to, so in other words, number one, they were incredibly intelligent, but also wise in the idea that they were in touch with something beyond their mind and thoughts and feelings. That's the pure wisdom that we relate to, that eye of the storm effect or blue sky mind. Getting back to this idea in all these cultures and societies, the way you can tell the story, in all these ancient forms of medicine that were around these cultures around the world, they proved themselves over thousands of years by science. In other words, did it work or did it not? And then if it didn't work, it was shoved out. And then how do you know it works? What are the theories behind why you give this plant, this combination, all that? What does it mean? Who are the people that would benefit? That kind of thing. So all those things have mapped out, worked over thousands of years. Then you come along with, okay, I want to sell you something. So ancient forms of medicine are extremely self-empowering because they want you to engage in your own healing, and plants are available to everyone. And you can learn to process the plants and everything. So this is ancient culture, right? This is part of what they would do. And then people helped each other out. So then modern culture comes along. Certain people want to gain prominence and dominate the availability of these medicines, say, for instance. Well, this is the story we're going to tell. Okay, so then you look back and you think, how does that happen? Well, firstly, we're going to have to get rid of this idea that you can treat yourself, because that's not going to work very well if I'm trying to sell you medicine if you think you can treat yourself. How do I do that in established forms of medicine, many different types? Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, Tibetan medicine, shamanic medicines that are actually intertwined with those, also along the Himalayas, and then into the indigenous regions of North and South America, everywhere in
every single region of every.
All over the world.
We've got these types of medicine, like Ayurvedic medicine or Chinese medicine, but you go anywhere to any native population in the world, and there's going to be stories of this plant, that plant. I mean, we have them here in BC, tons of plants that can be amazing, to heal infections and things.
And amputations and everything before modern medicine, that kind of thing. And they look through all the different bodies of people that have been killed in war, all that kind of thing, disease. So the idea is they had wisdom way beyond what we're told. They did, way beyond. And you can even look at that. When you don't have access to books for long and you have to learn something, you'll watch your mind. If you give it little tricks to help it too, you'll see, whoa, I had no idea. The Tibetans get you to do this in part of the formal practice for me, these long tracks of learning Sanskrit, which even if you don't know it, you have to learn these huge tracks of Sanskrit and memorize them. And then you think, I can't, there's no way I could do that. I know that I work with my memory pretty well. I thought there's no way I can memorize that. And I did. Yeah. So the idea is you just have to stop this belief that you can't. So when we talk about modern medicine, where it came from is, okay, I need to get rid of all this self-reliant, self-empowering BS, because I need them to be dependent on me. So let's stream in now. There's other things going on, but let's stream in the Rockefellers with their oil industry, right? Okay, so we're not going conspiracy here. We're talking complete fact of how this played out, right? So, okay, the Rockefellers they're the oil magnates. They're already, massive wealth, everything like that. How can we make money on the value as a value added thing from things we're going to scrap from the oil, the crudes and that? And then they find out, hey, you know what? We could make chemicals that are very stimulating or suppressing. And you start seeing what they're doing in Germany and other areas. You know what? We could make drugs for this. But now we have to get rid of the other medicine. So how do we do that? So we focus on these single mechanisms of action, and we go head to head with the drugs, and we either stimulate or suppress that mechanism, and say if that mechanism is involved with, say, arthritis. This pain mechanism, inflammatory mechanism is involved. If you are able to suppress it greater than the other things suppress it, then you beat them. That sounds right. That sounds good. Yeah, that's true. But there's multiple different mechanisms and multiple things going on with arthritis. So we're talking about a suppressive function that's not anything about healing at all. It gets rid of all the ancient ideas of self-empowerment, healing, balance, flow, centering practice. Everything's gone. That's why they don't talk about nutrition at all. Get it out of here. Get it out of here, because that's about healing. We don't want healing. We just want suppression and stimulation. And then how do we then convince all the doctors and pharmacists and everybody else who are all right now, even in the Western mainstream, using plant medicines and everything, right? How do we stop them? Well, we basically fund the schools. So we fund the schools, and then in any form of media we can, we start putting out hit pieces on all the forms of traditional medicine, natural medicines.
Yeah. And another thing that's often said is there's not enough research to back up 100%. this product, this herb, this compound that's found in nature. There's not enough research. Well, whose research are we talking about here, right? We're talking about, Western research, or the allopathic research, I guess you'd say. Right?
And who has the money to do that except people that are making money off your health? So a healer doesn't have any money. That's the whole point. Ancient healers had no money. As a matter of fact, a lot of them, like in China, they didn't get paid unless you were healthy. You got paid when you were healthy. You didn't get paid when they were sick. So they had every intention to get you helping in your own health process. So anyways, again, empowering. This is a medicine that's become, whether anybody involved or not, they know it or not, they typically don't on that level, is that it's become part of a practice of relying on an expert that is regulated by a body that is controlled by industry, which is this is the method of how it's happened. And then if you look at it, and the media now is so powerful all over the place, you look at the media can be bought in every single stage, including social media, right? Yeah. You buy it, and you buy algorithms. Google is bought up. So you can look, if you look up a herb, this is a classic example of how they are still controlling, even in their downfall, which is imminent, is they're controlling a Google search. If you look up a herb, all the medical sites for that herb will show up instead of the ones that actually study, practice, manufacture, and live it. They don't come up until streaming pages downward. So in other words, controlling an algorithm, and then people say, this is what Google said. Yeah, Google said that. And then AI right now, who knows what's going to happen with it, but it keeps getting boxed in with basically gates. Imagine this kind of intelligence that can research everything, but then you give it certain rules, but you can't say this about this ever, and you can't go out to this. So you've got all these different AI systems being built by different organizations that allow or disallow certain information. Everybody's trying to get their view, it's very tribal, out there on all sides, right? But in the case of the pharmaceutical industry, say the big guys, they have intense amounts of money.
Yeah.
And they're tied to other industries, right? And you've got all these investment firms tied to other industries, right? You look at these different huge money finance groups like BlackRock, Vanguard, State, all these kinds of, they have massive amounts of power. So then they put out that power as advertising dollar.
And 120 years of experience, let's not forget that.
Exactly.
That they have, right? To have formed this.
And groups that want to control that system, not just medicine, control the way that you think, because it is about, say, self-reliance. So if you think of these people on a compassionate level, it's folks that have lost touch with the sense of we, and lost touch with the sense of the nature of their own mind, the blue sky idea, and the relaxation, spaciousness, openness, authenticity, relaxation.
Yeah.
They're not comfortable with uncertainty, so they want to control everything. So this is like, you look at that inside then and say, do I have that in myself too, right? Is that why I'm buying into this? Do I want that too? That kind of idea. It's always about self-reflection, also looking out in the world. Mm-hmm. So they got control through media. Then you're allowed to lobby government. You're allowed to lobby in the Senate, and you're allowed to lobby in Canada, say the House of Commons, or in Congress in the state. You can lobby them with dollars to hold meetings and sway, and then you don't give that money to them that they need for their finance campaigns and everything, their operation, and for a voice, and you get blacklisted if you don't. So you receive this money, and then that's why they say you have a good intentions going in, then you get tainted quickly. And then there's all these other techniques that they use, right? So the idea is, what's going on then? Why are we? Is this a negative thing? Yeah, it is actually negative. You got to look at the negative first. But secondly, The last few years, to me, if I tell this story, the last few years of what happened with, COVID and the entire thing, you could look at that as a methods to control and to see how far we would go and to listen. And then our actions are duly noted on all sides, right? And then if you don't go along with this narrative that everybody bought into it, that kind of thing, then you're you're evil, you're against society, whatever, like that. That's all already, there's errors in philosophical discourse right there that you can look at, like setting up a straw man, you can look at ad hominem, all these different things that are being used. But the second time, you're also seeing, okay, how come they have to use these techniques now? Are they feeling like they're losing control? And you know what? If you don't have any more ability to research and develop anything that's truly exciting, you're just modifying existing classes for the most part, you're losing control. If everything starts to go generic because you're losing your patents of your key drug, you're losing control. So what do you do then? If you're smart in business, then you're going to diversify. If you realize I can't actually maintain control with this model anymore, and cracks are showing up with all the side effects and deaths and everything going on, what do? People are starting to research about nutrition and everything. I hate that. We got to stop that. And supplements, all these supplements, these guys are all snake oil salesmen, all this kind of stuff. You just basically, it's just ad hominem. Keep on talking like these systems of medicine don't have thousands of years behind them, and that your chemical medicine. This is the funny thing. I heard this before. They said, hey, you know what? I bet you have a pharmaceutical deficiency. You need to take this pharmaceutical because you're deficient. You know what I mean? And why would you not talk about nutrition a lot when you're coming into contact? The largest surface area in your body that you absorb and assimilate through is your gastrointestinal tract by far. It's massive compared to your skin, right? So the fact that you're coming into contact with the outside world extraneously through this mucosal membrane, why would you not be talking about what you're eating?
Yeah.
And then, you know what? You think about nourishment. Well, it had nothing to do with eating. I'm not eating right now. Yeah, but what are you breathing? Because you're breathing in and eating, those things tied together. It's like people call it breatharians, right? I don't live on breath. But you know what? There are things in the environment you're breathing in that you're basically are forming part of your body. Mm-hmm. So if you're in a toxic environment, get a filter or something. Yeah. If you can't get out of that environment, get some type of a high quality filter, because at least it's going to help somewhat. And then eat things that encourage the health and activity of detoxification systems, including your blood, your lymphatic system, your liver, your kidneys, all that, your skin. So, and then exercise, because motion encourages the flow in motion to get things going. So you just see what I mean? And then it goes back to mind. So the pharmaceutical industry right now, to me, they've lost hold, but they have exceedingly sick amounts of money, right? So then what do? Okay, so they're buying our industry. They've done this before, right?
Yeah, and there's a unfortunately, there is a large population that is dependent on their products as well. And so when people are dependent on something, then they're very adverse to change, right? And that's a big one, right? Yeah. When someone says, "Well, I've taken this and it's really helped me," okay, well, there you go. You believe it's helped you, and it has helped you if that's what you say. To shift over to something else, in the natural world is very, very scary, especially when you have. Well, let's just say it. There's a cult-like aspect to Western medicine in some ways, just like there is. I mean, there's a lot of things in this world that have a cult-like aspect to them, right? But you have, very good people that are working in the medical industry that firmly believe what they're doing is right, and 100%. So they are being authentic in many ways. And you're going in and you're interacting with these medical doctors, and you're like, well, no, they really knew what they were talking about. And they did know what they were talking about, right? But there is the other, just got to turn that page over and look at the other side of, there's always two sides to that piece of paper. And so, or the story or whatever you want to say. And that other side is, it's like it's like the page is kind of like a quarter turned and people are kind of like looking and they can see like little bits of information on the other side. Like, okay, what does that mean? What is that word? Oh, I can only get 9 of the 11 letters in that. What's that? Ayurvedic, what is that word? What is that, natural medicine? And we're just getting there. We're ready to turn that page, I think. We're getting close. The amount of people that I meet out in the natural health world that are asking questions, and the questions that are asked are different now too. Yes, and that's an important thing to know, right? Like we talk about, and
even that's where we got that stage of, we had no analysis before. We go along with all the systems, including medical doctors and everything, and lawyers, and they're all regulated regulated by their bodies. So their bodies are controlling the flow of information, and who is actually in control of the regulatory bodies. That's where you have to look at the treatment companies have their fingers into all the different bodies. They always have. That's how the system works the way it does. That's why we don't talk about nutrition, why we downplay it, why we make all the natural things have said they're all like that. So then why is McNeil owns Tylenol? Why are they making a curcumin supplement now?
I was going to bring that one up.
The idea is that they've known all along that this works. A lot of the drugs have been derived from other plant-like medicine. A classic example is salicylic acid in white willow bark that the First Nations people used to treat pain. They added an acetyl group to make it acetyl salicylic acid, and now it's ASA aspirin, and that was like the mother of the birth of pharmaceutical industry. So was penicillin, which is actually from nature.
Yeah.
Right? So penicillin and salicylic acid are like the birthplace kind of the whole of modern medicine, and yet they're natural products. And then you downplay white willow bark like, oh, nothing, only ASA form. Yeah, because they can patent it. So the whole idea is we're returning to, when you say we've turned a page, to me, the pages then, we've become so reliant on these regulatory systems in everything, right? In science, in medicine, they're all systematic. We're all set to believe. And then people want to be part of the system, so they don't want to go against their peers for it's fear. So they have a hope and fear. So the idea of intelligence.
Fear and doubt.
Fear and doubt. And doubt is, again, fear, right? So it's like the idea, I doubt myself. I'm uncertain about my assignment. And there's fear in that. I need to be certain. So the idea is if you can break free of these systems, and if the clinicians and everybody who wants to be thought of as somebody within that system is willing to go out and go against that system. And that's why I think it's beautiful when you're no longer part of a system that you have to speak in a certain way, right? And you know my stories that I definitely do not stand down when I feel like I need to share information with the world, and that I don't feel it's for me, because if it was for me, then you don't do this kind of stuff. We both have done this. So you speak out, right? Especially in the last 5 years. And the idea is when you speak out, you think people tell you, oh, as if they're watching you or as if they're listening to what you're saying, all that kind of stuff. And you believe that, right? Because there's a feeling of insignificance in that. It's a disempowering type of thing to say to somebody that they can't make a difference. And I love that saying, but anybody who thinks they're too small to make a difference obviously hasn't been in bed with a mosquito. So the idea is that, you can, once we start speaking out against this, and I feel like that is the movement you're saying. Not only are we starting to turn this page a little bit and looking, but there's a slight analysis going on. So the world is not as simple anymore. We're starting to pull off the cover, right? The dirt is starting to settle in the pond. There's some clarity forming in the water of our minds and in the way we think of the world. Is that, okay, they know in business, if they want to shift on, they're going to pivot. And the pivot has been, like I said, buying up our industry. And this is problematic because when you have an industry starts to buy the natural health industry, which is a gateway to the ancient medicines, there's no other industry that is better to be as a gateway to the natural, ancient, traditional medicines. But also my feeling is not just medicine, ways of farming, nutrition, other ways of thinking about how we can be in community, other ways of thinking about wisdom and knowledge, instead of what is pushed on us to believe that a way of living and thinking is way better than the way we live, and it's all whitewashed. Because here's the thing, I've sat with people that when you're talking about, okay, we got to live like them, and then people that are from those kind of cultures and that say, did they forget that we used to do this and this and this way before they came? So the idea is, okay, we can't set up these fake figures, right? That are cultures in ancient times. Everybody had their foibles and things like that. What we're trying to do is to pull out the best, to me, this is one way of thinking, the best of all these different ways of being, whether it be ancient, modern, whatever. Don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, but don't glorify and whitewash other cultures and act like they're the end all and be all, because it's not that way. The idea, and then don't mix up all these things and make them so they don't even have any power anymore, dilute them, but find all these great things in society. The health food industry, because it's always been that kind of renegade rebel in many ways, is they've maintained that spirit, that drive, before of ancient ways and different ways of being. And they've had to be at least slightly comfortable with uncertainty because people attack you for not thinking like them when you're part of a system that drives you to make you feel you have to think the same as everybody else. So I feel like if you want to break into and out of this system as it's falling apart anyway, what better way to accelerate that than to visit health food stores, visit natural health clinicians, visit functional medicine doctors, which are medical doctors that also have natural input, right? We're starting to bridge the gap with the ones that have the courage to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's going to be most people who don't want to speak. And then I think the fact that, you can go up and say things that are extremely powerful, but also very much against the industry, the way it is, the system set up, it shows that things are breaking down.
Yeah.
Because before they would have just suppressed that. And I mean, they definitely tried with me to suppress me in a very big way, which I can get into another episode. But you just have to stand up and say, no, that's not what I did. That's not what I said.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to listen, and it turned out very well for me. And I'm definitely going to speak on that. But the idea is, I know that it's falling apart. Mm-hmm. All the signs show that. So it's about if you're ready for that or not, and how do you prepare yourself for that? And that's about opening yourselves up to these ancient ideas before it gets manipulated and people trying to sell you those ideas, that they're there for you to empower you.
You know what's a really good one is acupuncture.
Yes.
If people aren't familiar with that, or I mean, everyone kind of knows the term acupuncture, but if you've never experienced acupuncture for pain, usually is what people get it for. Just try that. Try going to see an acupuncturist and do your research. There's new acupuncturists that are just starting and they may be great, or there's seasoned ones that are going to have quite a bit more knowledge around acupuncture, but try different practitioners as well. But when you get relief from something like acupuncture, I think it can really open people's eyes, right? Because you meet many, many people that have, that feel that the Western medicine you can follow that approach, and as long as you do other things, and you're going to be okay with that. And they do follow the protocols that are set in place by the health bodies still, but they have had acupuncture and it did work for them, right? Yeah. So that's an ancient medicine. And when you see something that gets into like benefits for large companies have health benefits for their employees. Acupuncture is on there now, right? So something has to be going on with acupuncture that it's actually working, that enough people at some point were like, no, we need to get acupuncture on here, right? So I just love that example because it's this art of putting needles into the body. I mean, when I was at my acupuncturist before I hiked one of my hikes this year, I was feeling pretty good, and she was giving me a treatment that was going to energize me. I don't think I said this on a podcast before, but she said, is there anything else that hurts? And I was like, oh, well, my left knee, it's always been tight, when I used to do a lot of racing, it was and I would just massage it or get treatment and, chiro, active release techniques, different things that would loosen it up, and then it'd just be fine, right? And it still is a little bit, nobody's body's perfect. I mean, it's just not possible the way our bodies are designed to be completely perfect, pain-free for life. And she said, oh, okay, what causes the pain? How does it? And I said, well, it's more like once I get at the start of the exercise, before I get going, before I get warmed up, essentially, there's a little bit of tightness above the kneecap. And she said, can you point where it is? So I point exactly where it is. It's basically directly above my kneecap. I'm like, yeah, it kind of radiates down into my knee a little bit, but then once I get warmed up, it's fine. And, it'll be tight the next day, maybe going down the stairs, I'll kind of feel it. I said, okay, so here's this motion, heard it. And I said, yeah, that feels uncomfortable when you do that. And she's like, she stuck one needle in one of my toes. I think it was my second toe. And this isn't like she didn't go out of the room and wait for half an hour or something. Yeah. She said, how about now? And I was just, that was probably the, 6th or 7th treatment I'd had with her. And that was really cool to experience that because the pain was gone. Good. And I mean, I'm open to natural health, obviously been in this industry for a long time now, been studying it for over 2 decades and just immersing myself in it. But that was one of those moments where you can have all the information you want, right? And you can read and listen to everybody talk and scour the internet for the guru of spirulina and the guru of whatever it is, right? But then when someone sticks a needle in your toe and the knee pain that you have had chronically, it's not bad pain. It's just there. It's just one of those things that my left knee and my left shoulder just always a little bit, it's gone, and then she takes it out, and then on the way home I do that again, and then it's there, because she wasn't treating it that day. She was just, I think she was just kind of doing it for fun, to be like if you want to get this knee fixed, we can, and it was mind-blowing. It was so cool, right? So like I said, I've been to her a bunch of times already, but that was like a whoa, eye-opening one where, so natural medicines can be so powerful, and acupuncture is such a cool one because it works in it. That's a whole nother podcast, as well.
And there's an idea then. Acupuncture is mostly working, say, with energetic fields and meridians, right? And then and points that are stronger than others, right? And if you hit it right, that's the thing. If someone just takes a course in acupuncture and then tries to add it to their practice, you'll notice a difference, unless they're a very intuitive person, because you definitely feel when you have the needle in the proper place, you as a practitioner and the patient can feel there's like a kind of idea. It's a totally different thing. And then if you look at that from the perspective of the ancient medicines, there was the 3 levels, say, of treatment. Okay. And the physical treatment level would be the most coarse. The energetic levels going deeper, which the meridians, acupuncture, everything tie into. And then the deeper levels is working with the mind. So you have mind, energy, body as a flow. Not to say that you can't get profound treatments in any one of those, and they're all obviously intertwined, like in the Triskel. But if you can effectively change your mind, it can change everything. Yeah. In much more profound ways than just changing your mind to a different thought or feeling or stance. I'm talking about opening your mind, fully opening your mind in ways that people try to use usually different drugs and that to gain those kind of things, which can be very problematic because it's just an experience. It's not realizing it or putting into practice, but whatever. Right. Yeah, and then the energetic level, have enough that, say you had enough acupuncture treatments and you're using herbs and that on the physical level too. And then you're working with your mind, you're starting to realize what it's like to be out of that pain like you're talking about. There's that saying, that song, Sunscreen. I don't remember that song way back. The guy's talking. He says, be kind to your knees. You'll miss them when they're gone. And so anyway, the idea is the mind, if you start to acclimatize, familiarize, and stabilize with that state that is pain-free, that say acupuncture and herbs are coming at, if you start to resonate with that, there becomes a sense of familiarity that then you actually, in the ancient ways of thinking, and you in modern times, you've done this, you don't necessarily know it, but you've actually broken free of that and it's gone away, and then you forgot it ever was. It's because your mind, your state of mind consciousness is familiarizing with that so much to the point that your whole systems become built on that new state of awareness. But then that state of awareness was initiated, say, in this case, by acupuncture and herbs or different plant or nutraceuticals. So the idea, and different ways of eating and motion, everything tied together. Why wouldn't we want to do that? Okay, there's a big problem that we have to address. The elephant in the room might be that we've become accustomed to laziness. Yeah. So mental laziness, energetic laziness, body laziness at all levels, even the laziness to even entertain the idea that we're much more powerful than we're told, that there's an intense power within us that we are just too lazy to even entertain because we're told, and it's easier just to follow along with everybody what they're saying because I don't want to have to think about it. And so this form of laziness needs to be overcome, and it is ubiquitous. It's part of the human experience when everything seems cushy. The beauty of it right now is nothing seems cushy because people can't afford groceries or gas or homes, and all these different dreams that people used to have when we were young are gone. Owning your own property and a home, all these things. And how is that set up? This is another story, but what I'm talking about right now, that's impacting at us a level of, okay, I'm not feeling so cozy anymore in this style of living and all these systems. I'm willing to entertain a different way. And then you just have to make it so that if you can empower someone enough, you give people kickstarts with nutraceuticals, like medicinal mushrooms. That's why I developed recovery, to give someone a kickstart to get them out of that stage that you said earlier. It's really difficult to meditate or anything else when you have a serious leg pain or back pain, you know what I mean? And
serious, yes. Small pain and stuff, you can, for lack of a better term, you can meditate your way through that.
Not the serious stuff. The serious ones. Then if you give people kickstarts, then they can sit or lay in meditation or whatever. The idea is to empower somebody that they can then take responsibility and even grow a garden of healing herbs, the ones that are specific to you or things that you might need, because it's beautiful to grow things for yourself, the whole idea of life and the cycles of life, and then seeing that you're actually growing something that costs almost nothing, that literally can get rid of your pain, your anxiety, like St. John's wort, depression, all those kind of things. Holy smokes.
And
I can grow them myself.
And you see it differently, right?
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
zucchini is an example of this. Okay.
Yes.
So I, with seeing the Chinese medicine practitioner, we talked about hydrating on a deeper level with soups and wet foods, congee, different wet rice meals, oatmeal, any of these things that they hydrate on a deeper level. And I remember talking to her last time I was there and saying, you're like, oh, how's your garden? Oh, it's good. It's good. Like, oh man, I got tons of patty pans, and patty pans are these yellow squash. And she's like, oh, those are so great for nourishing and hydrating on a deep level. And I was just like, yes, that's what I'm working on right now. So now, I take care of everything in the garden, right? But I'm out there making sure that all the patty pan leaves that are dying are chopped off so the plant can really, really thrive. So I actually see that yellow, funky looking zucchini as a totally different food than, say, someone walking down the street, or me 2 years ago, a year ago, 6 months ago, not even, right? Like I see that food totally differently. And so I know when I take that food and I cut it up and I put it into the soup or whatever I'm going to do with it. Make a lot of, our dog loves veggies, so we grow a lot of our own veggies. So she's going to get a whole bunch of that as well, right? So there's lots of reasons to grow food. But I see that food now as something different. And so that soup that I had this morning that was, had locally heirloom chicken in it and some other vegetables and stuff. It was a very simple soup, but just knowing that zucchini's in there and knowing that that's helping me on a deep level, it just makes the whole experience of eating, it takes it to a whole nother level, right? So the more natural health understanding and sort of information you have, which is part of the reason we have this podcast, is to provide this information, the more empowering it can be to you. And it can make that transition easier from being like, I just, I don't know, I kind of like my aspirin every day, like it's, no, it's okay. We can, here's some more information. Here's a little more, here's a little more. And then eventually you're going to get that information from somebody, might not be us, might be, somebody on some podcast somewhere else that's going to just click. It's just going to make it click, and it's going to be that turning point, right? And the more information that's shared around this, again, the faster that house is just going to crumble down.
It is crumbling. And what you're saying there, when you're talking about growing foods and all the things you were bringing up, it reminds me of two things, maybe that we're finishing off on these ideas. So this one is, as we're breaking free of these systems that are set up, one is the whole modern medical paradigm and the regulatory bodies associated with that, is that there's the movie Divergent. You ever seen that one? About different factions, right? So you have different factions.
Terrible with movies. You're going to ask me, and I'm gonna have to get a list of movies to watch when I'm like 70 years old.
It's a good one. So it's basically, right?
I got time for it. I'd rather be out mountain biking, sorry.
But these like popular culture in this time, and then I'll tie back to Greek philosophy as well as Plato, is that they have different different aptitudes. So there's different people say more associated with a fearlessness, like dauntless they call them, or the intelligentsia kind of idea, or the farmers, right? The ones that are amicable, like very amity, they're very pleasurable or pleasing to others, that kind of thing. And then they have one that they didn't want, and then when they ever saw come out, would be that they had qualities of all of them, right? So now we're pigeonholed a lot. Even we pigeonhole ourselves into things we think we're good at or not good at, because we don't realize the inherent power within the mind is very intense, and that we can branch out at any age, kind of idea. Yes, it's easier when you're young, but you can branch out at any age. Mm-hmm. So the divergents, they're basically hunted. So if they could diversify and be open in this SOAR response, SOAR, is they were hunted because they knew that they would open up the rest to the idea that they were divergent. So then, and same as in Plato, is when he was asked the question to structure or society in the Republic, he basically sets it up into all these same types of categories, right? And they had to break it up and suppress certain things for society to work. One interesting segue on that is the artists, of which are not just painters, things like that, but all forms of artistry that Plato felt like, whether people agree with it or not, that you needed to disallow certain forms of art because they would corrupt and break down society. So when you focused on negative, hedonistic, and degrading forms of things that were against cohesiveness of a society, that could break a society open. It's not to say that you shouldn't obviously comment on the negatives, but it shouldn't be out in open sphere. It should be in proper discourse. The rest of his society was built on the idea of that type of discourse.
That proper discourse is an important point too. I don't want to go off too much, but
we can't be emotionally afflicted. If we carry into discourse, if everybody says everybody's opinions matter, let's just examine that. Do they really? If you don't even know why you have an opinion, you have an opinion because your expert or your podcast or whatever told you to have that opinion, you're a former or government or country or whatever who's in power, they told you to have that opinion, you don't understand it. Should you go out and then express your opinion? Because that's things like Facebook does that, right?
Yeah.
That people argue about things that they don't even know anything about. It's interesting because they think, is that good for society? That's what Plato was arguing against. Because social media is a form of art. It's that open expression of all these things happening. And artistry was in everything to do in Greek life, right? So you think an artisan didn't just mean what you'd think it meant. It meant everything, the way that you expressed and you were in the world was a form of art and it was creative. But if it's being conditioned, that's not a creative flow. So if it's being conditioned by negativity, which artisans of any type can have, and you keep participating in that, you will degrade and fracture society. And that's what does happen. It becomes tribal. But in that he had the philosopher kings. So in modern times, we say the philosopher queens or regents, right? Or beings. Basically, those were the ones that were like a divergent. They had to encapsulate all different aspects of what it meant to be a good human being. Another great one that really focused on that idea of to bring out the greatness as a human being on this mundane worldly level, especially, was Confucius. Right, and then you balance Confucius with Lao Tzu, and whether that was a conglomeration of sages in the Taoist system, and you have that openness, but also order, right, in the Asian system. But we had that in all these different systems. We had that, and everybody actually in ancient times, they had indigenous or out of the box kind of ways of living in the world that were in balance with nature.
Right.
It wasn't just what we call the First Nation Aboriginal peoples here. It was everywhere. We had that. You had to be in balance with nature. Otherwise you were pummeled by it, right? Yeah. And by other tribes and things like that. So that was all over the world. When we try to make it sound like it wasn't, it was. And then it just got, again, when power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. And this has happened over time, through time. It always happens, though, when you say that, it has to have a caveat. It's with people that don't understand the true nature of who they are. So it's more me, less we. And so this has happened through time. And then if you feel like, if we could all understand, this is just my thinking, I'm just blowhard here, in my humble opinion, is if we could all find that touch point of the divergent or the philosopher being, or whatever you want to call it, within us, that is all about how do we build a beautiful society without suppressing the innate uniqueness that we share in the world. I think that's what we need to do. And that's the systems, to me, that are being broken down right now. And modern medicine is just one aspect of that, and education is another aspect, and governance as a whole is another aspect. Were they ever actually operating in our benefit? Mm-hmm. Not the people in the front lines per se, like you said with the clinicians, not that. Behind the scenes, though, were they ever operating for our benefit? And if you look and you analyze it, you can see that no, they weren't. And if they were, it was always to gain dominance by suppressing everybody else. So it wasn't that open kind of free thinking, caring way of being, which is why I feel like if we embrace that, then we get into touch with how we all relate wholeheartedly, which is the eye of the storm, which is meditation, is that complete openness. It's not in the thoughts and feelings and all that. It's not how we relate. As a matter of fact, it can make you a really angry person, a really angry activist kind of idea, when you feel like everybody that relates in certain emotions and thoughts and ideas and stances and ways of being in this world, thinking everything, that is somehow better than everybody else. It creates, you see it creates these inferiority, superiority, willingness to engage in ad hominem and name calling and all this base vice behavior happens simply because we do try to relate to that instead of the openness.
Yeah, and you got to listen to your feelings and your emotions too, because we've all done that. We've all done things that we regret, right? Yeah. And you have to stop and listen, because when what you've done is wrong, yeah. Right? And I don't know how I got into that little tangent there, but there was,
when you're focusing on some of the emotions and thoughts, you still see through them, and you learn from them.
They happen, yeah, and then you see through them, you learn through them, you feel what that feels like. I don't want to feel that again, so I'm not going to do that again, right? And actually acknowledge that, and not pay attention to the outside world that's saying that that's okay. It's okay to do this. It's okay to do that. It's like, well, if inside it's saying it's not right to do, then it's right.
Sometimes it takes 40 or 50 years to listen.
Yeah. Oh man, 43. Yeah. In this case, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's that's a super fun part about the world right now too, is all these natural medicines and natural ways of living are opening up again, right? It's just it's helping us see. Yeah, this is kind of what the crux of what we're talking about, right? But it's helping us see the things that were not working very well, right? I mean, when you start to see on the other side of the fence that stuff that looks a little bit better, the grass is greener on the other side, right? When you start to see that, well, then you're like, well, I think I'm done with this old way of this sort of brown straw over here. I want that fresh spring grass over there, And once you see it, you can't unsee it either. And that's the beauty of our natural health industry, is you meet people all the time that were just trying to chug it along, and everything was going great. Then they had something happen, and then the system didn't help them, right? Yeah. And then they came to the natural health industry out of desperation, and it did help them. And it's just amazing to see those stories. Those are the most fun ones, right? They're way more fun than the person who's been, I've been doing this for 25 years and I'm getting better and better. That's great too, right? Because you want to do that, but the really impactful ones they're so much fun to hear from people.
And that's when you have the willingness to diverge. Into an unknown area for you. Because we all are trying to go in these cookie cutter ways of being in systems of education and medicine, everything like that, is like you said, when it's no longer working, it can give you the push that then it invokes that courage in you to, okay, now I got to try this then. So I've heard people talking about everything. I've never seen it. It's scary. You do it. And then another thing you realize, I think, about the health industry is you have a lot of really heartfelt people in the industry. And most of them have come to the industry because they've had a significant healing response to something.
Or a family member has, or a family member
seen something happen. And then they know. And here's the thing, if you experience something or a family member experiences something and everybody tells you, no, that doesn't work, snake oil, all this stuff, you're like, I don't care if it's the world foremost expert that tells you, if you've seen it otherwise, they're just hot air.
Yeah.
And you know what? Why do you have to hold on to that so strong? Why do you have to hold the idea that everything natural couldn't work? And I got to finish it with a story.
All right.
So I was taking my dad to the hospital. This is years ago. My dad had 6 bypasses when he was in his 40s, early 50s. Had 6 bypasses, had 6 stents, defibrillator pacemaker. So anyway, he's going through a heart event. And I had to take him to the hospital. He has a heart attack there. And then they have to work on him. And it's full of all these, because it was so busy at that time, I don't know why. They had all these curtains separating everybody, and you had tiny space. And so I got in there to see him. My dad had just come back from being totally out. He didn't have any skin color from anybody who's seen that. He looked like he wasn't alive kind of thing, but he was talking to me, totally gray, white, and laying there. And I was holding his hand. And then beside me, and he was too weak to say anything. And then beside me, there's a doctor. He's talking to the patient. And the patient was talking about some natural thing. I don't remember if it's CoQ10 or something like that. It's a heart thing for him too, right? He was talking about it. And the doctor said, let's face it. If it doesn't have any side effects, it's not doing anything. And then my dad, even though he's just come back, he could feel me, and he looked at me, and he goes like this. He, with his head back and forth, he goes, don't say anything, Jane, because he knows that I would. But it blew my mind. Is to thinking that there is that idea, even within people who've become accustomed to the side effects of Western medicine, that is the only way medicine works. And that is a load of BS, because the ancient medicines in many cases are a gentle form of medicine that is about bringing balance and homeostasis and encouraging your body to do its job rather than suppressing or stimulating, which is almost all of modern medicine today with pharmaceutical medicine is suppression or stimulation. Yeah. That's why you become dependent on them, because your body didn't change anything. As a matter of fact, it encouraged you to live whatever way you were living that could have led to that, because now it gives you a false sense of security. And then they stop working over time and then you wonder why. Yeah, because it's basically been this weird Band-Aid and it never did anything. And eventually the thing's going to burst. Yeah. And so that's a big difference in the holistic side of the ancient medicines. They really are about the centering, bringing back healing, bringing back power to you, whether you rely then on you want to do it through supplements or where you want to grow your own food. At least you have the knowledge of all of these thousands of years that ancient cultures have brought forth. And every culture has local things you can do too. And that's how we can learn from everybody. But again, the health food industry brings a ton of that experience to help you maybe go into the right direction, that if you start explaining what you're interested in, there'll be somebody in the store that probably has the same similar interest or has at least some experience with it. And they can help you along with books or where to go on this site or videos or whatever. Yeah. It's just this industry has been suppressed for so long and now it's starting to blossom that I feel like I just can't wait to see how it makes all the people in this industry open up to share what they've wanted to share for so long without being poo-pooed or made fun of at family gatherings or whatever. Now everybody is open to it. Yeah. It's exciting for me. And I feel like all the people in the health industry, thank you for sticking it out. Yeah. Under all this and being critical and everything, thank you for sticking it out, because now's the time for you to share and be the gateway to the ancient ways of being in this. And it's unbelievable. It's like you said with your experience with acupuncture. It's absolutely unbelievable. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's for people that are new to the natural health industry too. It can be intimidating, right? But it will usually take some time, right? But think about it this way: we keep harping on how these medicines have been around for hundreds and thousands of years in many cases. I had this thought one day where I was just like, so, people will kind of not, respect the natural medicine so much if they haven't been exposed to it too much. But think about it this way. Would you go in and start speaking to your grandmother and be like, well, I mean, I don't know. She's got these stories, but I'm not sure they're scientifically validated, right? Grandma's 94, but what does she know? It's just like, no. So, think about ancient medicine like your grandma. Pay it respect, and it's wise because it's been around for a long time and it's been through a lot of hard things and it's been through a lot of great things. And it's really just the flower is just opening now, I think,
I agree. Yeah, that's a good place to end it. Cool. With the flower blossoming. This is a good one, man.
The lotus.
Yep. We're here.
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.